Gold Tycoon in America in 1850. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 276, Very Hungry. Elvis led the soldiers of the Arizona Infantry Regiment to land at Wayne Fort and quickly formed a battle formation to approach Wayne Fort. Although the soldiers of the Arizona Infantry Regiment were newly recruited by Liang Zhao, they were all veterans who had been through many battles. Facing the tragic situation of the Saga samurai on Wayne Fort, they did not feel any psychological discomfort and calmly advanced forward with their guns. What surprised Elvis was that the 200 remnants of the Wayne Fort actually took the initiative to launch a suicidal charge against them. These ignorant Japanese monkeys are simply looking for death. Elvis frowned and gave the order. Freely shoot on the spot, don't leave any alive. The leading sergeant carried the Saga clan flag and rushed towards the Arizona Infantry Regiment, followed by a group of samurai, like moths to a flame. The soldiers of the Arizona Infantry Regiment raised their dresser needle guns and pulled the trigger at the crazy Japanese monkeys. How could medieval soldiers armed with swords, guns and primitive firearms be the opponents of modern armies? Dense bullets ruthlessly harvested the lives of these Japanese samurai and smashed the flag of the Hizen Saga domain. Soon, the soldiers of the Arizona Infantry Regiment easily eliminated the remaining soldiers on the Wayne Battery and captured the Wayne Battery. Elvis cut off the Saga domain flag on the Wayne Battery and replaced it with the regimental flag of the Arizona Infantry Regiment and the American Stars and Stripes. The soldiers of the Arizona Infantry Regiment who captured the Wayne Battery cheered like a tsunami. The Arizona Infantry Regiment has taken on the task of capturing the Wayne Battery, and the capture of Nagasaki will be handed over to our California Infantry Regiment, Deng Yan said. Maybe the California Infantry Regiment doesn't have this opportunity. Liang Zhao stared at the Wayne Battery and said. No chance. Deng Yan didn't understand what he meant. The Japanese have always been tough and not soft. Naoto Nama is not a fool. With a previous experience of Wayne Fort, they will definitely not fight with us again. After the Battle of Wayne Fort, he can also give an explanation to the Tokugawa shogunate, Liang Zhao said to everyone with his hands behind his back. It's getting late. Everyone, have a good rest. We will enter Nagasaki tomorrow. At the same time, Nagasaki City was shrouded in a panic, which spread rapidly with the fall of Wayne Fort. Master, the Americans have completely captured Wayne Fort, and no samurai on Wayne Fort survived. Okijajin reported the news of Wayne Fort to Naoto Nama in despair. How is it possible? It's only been one day, and Wayne Fort has been lost. Nagasaki Magistrate Osamu Setsu didn't believe that Wayne Fort would be lost in just one day. Naoto Nama also had a painful expression on his face, and then took a deep breath and said to Okijajin. Send an envoy to Edo to inform the general of this news. You will come with me to Land Pavilion and Tang Pavilion now. Yes, Master. The next morning, as Liang Zhao expected, Naomi Sakojima took the initiative to visit, and Naomi Sakojima was followed by several Dutch and Chinese people as interpreters and assisted in mediation. Liang Zhao and Perry met with Naomi Sakojima on the Roland. Japan and the United States have no hatred, so why would they fight each other? Naomi Sakojima said. Liang Zhao was not completely unable to speak Japanese, but he only knew a few words such as Yamidi, Sugoi, and Yiku. It was obviously beyond his ability to ask him to communicate with Naomi Sakojima in Japanese. The Dutch brought by Naomi Sakojima did not speak English very well at first, but were more proficient in French, so they translated Naomi Sakojima's words into French. Fortunately, Liang Sen was proficient in English, Chinese and Japanese and acted as a translator. No hatred, Liang Zhao sneered, when you abused the crew of my American whaling ship, ignored our country's note, and handed the crew of the American whaling ship to the Dutch for disposal. Did you ever think that this day would come? We can make compensation. Naomi Sinabeshima gritted his teeth and said. Naomi Sinabeshima, who has been a feudal lord for so many years and is proficient in Chinese studies, naturally knows that it is easy to find excuses to accuse someone of a crime. Abusing the crew is just an excuse for the other party. But at present, he is weak and facing a strong enemy. Naomi Sinabeshima can only choose to give in, hoping to pay some money and end the matter. Liang Zhao went on an expedition and came to Japan from afar, not just to ask for compensation. Compensation is necessary, but compensation is not a long-term solution. Only a treaty can maintain a long-term peaceful and friendly relationship between the United States and your feudal domain, as he said. Liang Zhao asked Hu Jinchen to hand the treaty to Naomasa Nobeshima. This treaty tailored for Nagasaki was written in both English and Japanese. Naomasa Naoshima took the treaty and read the contents of the treaty. First, the Hizen domain compensated the United States for the military expenses of the Army and Navy of 500,000 taels of silver each, totaling 1 million taels. Second, the Nagasaki game fort was taken over by the United States. Third, a concession was set aside in Nagasaki for the United States to establish the American Pavilion. The lease was 100 years. The concession was equivalent to the territory of the United States. The American law was implemented within the concession, and the shogunate authorities and the Nagasaki authorities were not allowed to interfere. Fourth, the United States enjoyed the same trade rights in Nagasaki as the Qing and the Netherlands. Fifth, American businessmen could freely open factories in Nagasaki. Sixth, American citizens enjoyed extraterritoriality in Nagasaki and the domain of Hizen, and Japanese law had no right to restrict American citizens. The contents of the treaty made Naomasa Naoshima's veins bulge. Naomasa Naoshima had a deep understanding of the treaties signed between the Qing dynasty and Western countries, and he knew what these treaties would mean to Nagasaki and even Hizen once they were signed. Each of these 6 treaties exceeded his psychological expectations, and none of them was acceptable to him. Even the indemnity, which was barely acceptable, greatly exceeded Naomasa Kojima's psychological expectations. These treaties are too harsh. I'm sorry, I can't accept them. Why are you pushing me too far? Naomasa Kojima refused to sign this harsh treaty. Seeing this, Perry whispered to Liang Zhao, the treaty can be appropriately modified to facilitate the signing of the treaty. Perry decided to stop while he was ahead. His goal was to sign a founding treaty with the Tokugawa shogunate in Edo, and he would accept any benefits he could get in Nagasaki. Liang Zhao's attitude was different from Perry's. He said to Naomasa Kojima very firmly, "It's not up to you to accept it or not. When my American army occupies Nagasaki, what I want to sign with you will not be this treaty. You have no bargaining chips with me now." The sea breeze blew on Naomasa Kojima's thin face, and his hair became a little messy under the sea breeze. Naomasa Kojima stood there helplessly, stunned for a long time, and then said to Liang Zhao, "This is a serious matter. I can't make the decision on Nagasaki alone. I need to go back and discuss with the Nagasaki magistrate before I can give you an answer. I am also an unreasonable person. I will give you 6 hours to discuss and consider. It is 6 o'clock in the morning. If I don't receive a clear reply from you by 12 o'clock, that is, noon, I will lead my troops to attack Nagasaki and discuss the treaty with you in Nagasaki." Liang Zhao took out his pocket watch and looked at the time and said, 6 hours, Naomasa Kojima said with a choked voice. "Nagasaki is already a fish on your chopping board. Why are you so anxious? Why are you so aggressive? I'm very hungry." After saying that, Liang Zhao no longer paid attention to Naomasa Kojima, turned to Hu Jinchen and said, "Jinchen, see the guest off." Chapter 277 Entering Nagasaki. If this treaty is signed, Saga and Nagasaki will become the laughingstock of all the feudal domains in Japan. After reading a copy of the treaty, Nagasaki magistrate Ieyasu was furious and threw the treaty into the air. Japan must not become the next Qing dynasty. The Qing dynasty has a vast territory and a large population. Even if it signs a few treaties, it can still survive. Our territory is not as vast as the Qing dynasty, and our population is not as large as the Qing dynasty. If we sign the Origami Treaty, Nagasaki, Saga and even the whole of Japan will never be able to turn things around. Ieyasu firmly opposed the signing of this humiliating and unequal treaty. He knew what signing this treaty meant to Nagasaki and even the whole of Japan. Do we have a choice? A full 1,000 brave and fearless samurai died on the game battery, but what did they get in return? Not only did they lose the game battery, but they didn't hurt the enemy at all. Pointless sacrifice and resistance will only bring greater losses to Nagasaki and Saga. Naomasa Naoshima roared heartbreakingly. His expression was painful and ferocious. If resistance had even a 1% chance of success, he would never be willing to bow his head. It is not up to you to accept this treaty or not. When the American army occupies Nagasaki, the treaty I will sign with you will not be this one. Liang Zhao's words on the Roland echoed in Nobeshima Naomisa's ears. The weak have no right to bargain. Nobeshima Naomisa was sober and decided to stop the loss in time. The samurai of the Saga family are not afraid of death. but they cannot die meaninglessly. He turned his head and glanced at the time on the western wall clock, and bowed deeply to Osawa Yasuda, Osawa-kun, for Nagasaki, for the future of Japan. Please don't act on impulse. Nagasaki finally succumbed to the powerful ships and guns of the United States. The Japanese have always been a very realistic and fickle nation. The Japanese have incredible madness, but they are not stupid. Sir, Naomasa Nabeshima, who boarded the Roland again, looked much more haggard, and his eyes became somewhat empty. It was only 5 hours since Naomasa Nabeshima last boarded the Roland. Naomasa Nabeshima bowed deeply to Liang Zhao with great sincerity. I can sign the 6 articles in the Treaty of Nagasaki within my authority. The first article, the indemnity of 1,000,000 taels of silver, and the second article, the takeover of the Nagasaki Outer Eye Fort by the United States, are within my authority. However, Articles 3 to 6 involve Nagasaki, and Nagasaki is the territory of the shogunate. I am not qualified to make decisions for the shogunate. The Saga domain is only responsible for assisting in the defense of Nagasaki, and has no right to manage Nagasaki, let alone make decisions on Nagasaki's affairs. Naomasa Nabeshima's words were not false. Given the special status of Nagasaki in Japan, the Saga domain was indeed unable to make decisions on Nagasaki's affairs. Only the Tokugawa shogunate in Edo could make a decision on Nagasaki. The construction of the game fort was not led by the Tokugawa shogunate, but because the game area was within the domain of the Saga domain, Nabeshima Naomasa was able to build a game fort in the game area. Nabeshima Naomasa's attitude can be said to be very sincere. I'm not unreasonable. Since you can't make a decision on the remaining 4 treaties on behalf of the Tokugawa shogunate, then you can go to Edo with me. In short, none of these 6 treaties can be missed. Liang Zhao looked down at Nabeshima Naomasa, who was a head shorter than him. I can sign the treaty, and I can also go to Edo with you. Nabeshima Naomasa gritted his teeth and said, but I have a small request. As long as you agree to my request, I will sign this treaty immediately. I said, you are not qualified to bargain with me. Liang Zhao frowned. It's not a bargaining, nor is it a matter of treaty. I admire the upper country very much. I hope to send some young people from Saga to study in the upper country, bathe in the wind of the upper country's civilization, and spread the grace and prestige of the upper country to the people of Saga after returning. As he said this, Naomasa Kojima, the lord of a domain, actually prostrated himself at Liang Zhao's feet and said in an almost pleading tone, please, I'm afraid your Edo general will not agree to your request, Liang Zhao said. Although Liang Zhao knew that Naomasa Kojima was a representative of the enlightened domain lords of the founding faction at the end of the shogunate, he was flexible and changeable. But Naomasa Kojima's attitude changed so quickly that Liang Zhao was deeply surprised. Perry, who was standing aside, widened his eyes after listening to Liang Sen's translation, with an incredible expression on his face. You know, just half a day ago, their troops were still fighting. I can make the decision on Saga's affairs, and I don't need the general to agree. Naomasa Kojima's attitude was extremely firm. You can send envoys to study abroad. We welcome them in America. But the tuition is not cheap. If you want to send envoys to study abroad, you need 500,000 taels of silver, Liang Zhao said with his hands behind his back. With Naomasa Kobe's eagerness to study, even if he rejected Naomasa Kobe's request to send students to study in the United States, Naomasa Kobe would bypass him and find Perry, or even other countries. Liang Zhao wanted to implement a policy of using Japan to control Japan in Japan, and he also needed to support local agents. His Saga domain was a powerful domain at the end of the shogunate, and it was a good choice. It is reasonable to send envoys to study and pay for the tuition. Faced with a huge tuition proposed by Liang Zhao, Naomasa Kobe gritted his teeth and agreed. After discussing some details, the two sides soon signed the first treaty in Japan's modern history, the Treaty of Nagasaki, on the Roland. After the signing of the treaty, American warships swaggered into Nagasaki. In the previous 200 years, the only Western ships that could enter the port of Nagasaki were Dutch ships. Previously, the Japanese upper class divided foreign countries into 3 categories. The first-class countries were the Qing dynasty and the Netherlands, which had long maintained diplomatic relations with them. After the Opium War, Britain also entered the ranks of the first-class countries that the Japanese considered. The second-class countries were countries such as Korea and Ryukyu that they were more familiar with. As for the third-class countries, they were those countries that they did not know. Obviously, The United States was also among the third-class countries, but from the moment the Nagasaki game fort was lost, the Japanese authorities had to rethink the position of the United States in their diplomacy. The American warships sailed into the port of Nagasaki, which not only shocked the local residents of Nagasaki, but also the Dutch and Liang keenly felt that Japan would change drastically. The Dutch's monopoly on trade with Japan in the future will be impacted by the United States. As the victor, the port of Nagasaki was naturally requisitioned by Liang Zhao to berth American warships and corresponding logistics ships. Considering the madness of the Japanese samurai, Liang Zhao chose a place near Tanguin for the mooring of ships and the rest of the army. Liang Zhao rode a tall horse and landed in Nagasaki under the welcome of Nabeshima Naomasa, which aroused the curiosity of the residents of Nagasaki. Facing this army that seemed to them to be dressed strangely and murderous, the residents of Nagasaki were shocked and frightened, and just watched the army enter the city in a daze. Chapter 278. Next stop, Edo. Unlike the reaction of ordinary people, the lower middle-class samurai in Nagasaki were heartbroken and beat their chests when they learned that the humiliating Treaty of Nagasaki had been signed. Some extreme lower-class samurai even went directly to the residences of Nagoya Naomasa and Osawa Yosutsu, wrote to the lords in Nagasaki Bujiyo, and bitterly explained the pros and cons, saying that the Americans entering Nagasaki and enjoying privileges in Nagasaki, with a higher status than samurai, was unprecedented, and would surely bring disaster to the empire and cause endless harm. These samurai requested to go to war, believing that they could defeat the Americans with strong ships and powerful guns, with the spirit of Bushido, and drive the Americans out of Nagasaki. The lower middle-class samurai were crazy, but Nagoya Naomasa and Osawa Yosutsu were not crazy. The crazy requests of these samurai were quickly refuted by Nagoya Naomasa and Osawa Yosutsu. Nagoya Naomasa even warned these restless samurai to keep to themselves and not to cause trouble, which would give the Americans an excuse and bring new troubles. But soon, what Naomasa Kojima was worried about happened. Liang Zhao settled the army and led his personal soldiers to Tanguin with Perry to discuss the supply of the trip to Edo with Chinese merchants. Not long after Liang Zhao and Perry left the military camp gate, a dozen samurai who had been waiting for a long time suddenly emerged from both sides of the road and drew their swords to block Liang Zhao. The personal soldiers on the left and right of Liang Zhao and Perry subconsciously blocked in front of Liang Zhao and Perry, and drew their guns at the lower-level samurai who were plotting against the law, thinking that this was an assassination. What shocked everyone was that the next second, these samurai stabbed the samurai sword into their stomachs, stirred the handles in their hands, and showed hideous and horrible perverted smiles on their faces, and shouted incoherently words such as "Long live the heavenly punishment." What's worse, some even pulled out intestines and organs from their bloody stomachs and threw them at Liang Zhao and others. Madmen! Madmen! These are a bunch of unreasonable lunatics. Perry was not mentally prepared for this. Even though Perry was a veteran naval officer who had experienced the bloodiness of the battlefield, he was still scared pale when facing these Japanese samurai who didn't care about their own lives. It's just the impotent rage of the weak. Shoot, Liang Zhao ordered to shoot with disdain. He would not be surprised by the strange tricks of these lunatics and perverts. These Japanese samurai just wanted to scare them by self-mutilation. He did not expect Perry and his soldiers to understand the strange brain circuits of the Japanese. After learning about this, Naomasa Kobe was furious. He did not expect that despite his repeated warnings, there were still samurai from the Saga domain who ignored the ban and provoked the Americans. He hurried to Nagasaki port to apologize to Liang Zhao and Perry. This incident scared Perry, but Liang Zhao was not affected. Liang Zhao threatened Naomasa Kobe about this matter and demanded compensation from Naomasa Kobe. This matter was entirely caused by some lower-level samurai of the Saga domain looking for trouble. In order to keep things quiet, Naomasa Nabeshima had no choice but to accept it. After resting for a few days in Nagasaki and replenishing fresh seasonal vegetables and meat, Liang Zhao took Naomasa Nabeshima from Nagasaki and marched into the Seto Inland Sea along the coastline of Japan, with his troops heading straight for Edo. The rapid defeat of the Hizen Saga domain, the fall of Nagasaki in one day, forced it to sign a humiliating treaty with the Americans, which shocked the surrounding Japanese domains. Upon learning that American warships flying the Stars and Stripes appeared at the gates of their own domains, the lords along the way were terrified, and everyone was in danger, fearing that they would become the next Saga domain, the next Naomasa Nabeshima. The Hizen Saga domain was one of the strongest domains, and it lost so badly in front of the Americans, not to mention the other domains that were weaker. The domains in Japan that were stronger than the Heisei Saga domain could be counted on one hand. Fortunately for the feudal lords along the way, Liang Zhao's goal was very clear, which was to be the shogun of Edo. He was not interested in the feudal lords along the way. Master, this time you take the American ship to Edo, you will inevitably bear the infamy of treason. You don't have to go to Edo with the Americans in person. On the Roland, Naomise Naoki's close retainer Akadashi Ren said to Naomise Naoki. Behind them were the guards responsible for monitoring their every move. Facing the sea breeze, Naomise Naoki showed a long-lost smile and said, "Aren't you afraid of being infamous if you follow me to Edo? Wherever the master goes, I will go. Everything I have is given by the master," said Akadashi Ren. Naomise Kojima stared at the Japanese coastline and said with regret, "These damn fragmented mountains and rivers have divided Japan, which is not big to begin with, into pieces. No matter which clan, even the powerful clan, is no match for these Americans." During these days on the Roland, Naomise Kojima felt a lot. The American warships were much more advanced than the Dutch ships he had inspected before, and the new naval guns on the ships opened his eyes. Naomise Kojima was defeated by these Americans with inferior skills. "How do you think Japan can defeat America and avenge today's shame?" Akadashi Ren asked solemnly. "To avenge today's shame, the 300 feudal domains in Japan must be united. The Qing dynasty did better than us in this regard," Naomise Kojima said, "but this is only the most basic prerequisite for avenging the shame." As he said that, Naomise Kojima turned around and said to Akadashi Ren, "Oki, you are different from other feudal samurai who can only solve problems with knives. You are talented, intelligent, diligent and studious. I heard that you have profound attainments in Chinese studies and Dutch studies. Compared with a master of the family, what Oki has learned is just some superficial knowledge," Akadashi Ren said modestly. "Whether it is superficial knowledge or the essence, from today on, forget what you have learned in the past. Neither Chinese studies nor Dutch studies can save Saga and Japan. When the Edo trip is over, you will go to the United States as the first batch of overseas students in Saga to study. After returning from your studies, tell me what kind of country I lost to," Naomise Kojima advised Akadashi Ren. "Yes, master," looking at Naomise Nabeshima, whose temples suddenly turned white and whose face was haggard. Akadashi Ren couldn't help but feel a lump in his throat. In October 1852, a large fleet appeared in Uraga, Edo. This fleet consisted of 7 warships, 4 large steam supply ships, troop transport ships, and Chinese hard-sail supply ships hired from Karakan in Nagasaki. Some unofficial histories and later generations said that the Japanese had never seen a steamship before the black ships came to Japan, which is inaccurate. In fact, before the black ships came to Japan, the Japanese not only saw steamships, but many Japanese feudal lords also boarded steamships for inspection. For example, Naomise Nabeshima, who loved Dutch studies, personally boarded a Dutch steamship for inspection when he was stationed in Nagasaki. The people in Nagasaki and its vicinity have more or less seen steamships, but the Dutch steamships were not large in tonnage and were not serious warships. The visual impact they brought to the Japanese was far from comparable to the warships of the American East India Fleet of more than 1,000 tons. After all, the Netherlands had already weakened completely in the last years of the shogunate. It was no longer the sea coachman of the early years of the shogunate and had long since become a second-rate country in Europe. However, the Japanese shogunate had been closed to the outside world for a long time and knew little about the unexpected international situation in East Asia. It still regarded the Netherlands as the first power in the West. However, it was true that the Japanese in Edo had never seen a steamship. The warships under Liang Zhao and Perry had just entered Uraga, the gateway to Edo Bay, Tokyo Bay, and caused a huge sensation before entering Edo. Chapter 279, Bombardment of Edo. The first to see the black ships were the fishermen fishing off the coast of Uraga. Against the backdrop of the huge black ships, these fishing boats looked as small as ants. The fishermen in Uraga looked at these big black ships spewing black smoke and blasting shrill whistles. Some were so frightened that they were speechless, while others regarded these big black ships as monsters from the bottom of the sea and fled in a hurry. Is this the black ship that appeared in Nagasaki in the rumor? These monsters are really big. On the coast of Uraga, the students of Chiba Dojo who were studying swordsmanship sighed as they looked at the monster-like black ships. Before Nagasaki was captured by the American army, the lord of Heisei Saga domain, Naomise Nabeshima, and the Nagasaki magistrate Osawa Yasuda had already sent envoys to inform the Edo authorities of the American black ships in advance. In addition, the American fleet was ostentatious along the way, and the originally lifeless Edo was also in an uproar because of this matter. "We need to practice swordsmanship diligently to keep the enemy out of the country," an older student said to the students of Chiba Dojo in the tone of a senior. The students all nodded in agreement. However, there was an unusually tall student who looked at the thin and fragile samurai sword in his hand, and then looked at the huge black ship entering Uraga port, and murmured to himself in a doubtful tone, "Can swords really defeat black ships?" More than 1,000 samurai shed blood on the Gang fort, but they couldn't stop the fall of Nagasaki. This discordant voice made the students of Chiba Dojo feel uncomfortable, and the older student was furious. "Sakamoto. You country bumpkin from Tosa, what depressing words are you talking about?" At this time, in the captain's room on the Roland, Liang Zhao and Perry looked at the defense map of the Uraga generation, which could be said to be no comparison and no damage. Compared with Nagasaki, Edo's coastal defense can be said to be completely non-existent. There are 5 forts to the west of Uraga, namely Chidazuki, Hokiima, Earl and Kanzuki, all of which are under the jurisdiction of Hikone domain. However, these forts are useless. First, the artillery on these forts is old and has a very limited range, which cannot threaten ships entering and leaving Edo Bay. And the location of these forts is not good, too scattered, which further weakens the role of these forts. Compared with these ineffective feudal lords in Edo, Naomi Sinabeshima can be said to be a great man among the feudal lords. The Tokugawa shogunate's response is a bit slow, and it has not given us a clear reply yet. The Tokugawa shogunate has not responded for a long time, which makes Perry a little impatient. "We have already entered Edo Bay. It is unrealistic for the Tokugawa shogunate to turn a blind eye to us," Liang Zhao said with his hands behind his back. "If the Tokugawa shogunate has not responded in 6 hours, we will bombard Edo and put pressure on Tokugawa Ieyasu, the coward." "What if the bombardment has no effect?" Perry asked. "Then we will land in Kanagawa," Liang Zhao said confidently, "but the possibility is very low. The Tokugawa shogunate has a paper force of about 80,000, but with the Tokugawa shogunate's low organizational and mobilization capabilities, the actual mobile forces that can be mobilized are only 20,000 to 30,000 at most. This number looks very scary, but these are medieval armies, which are qualitatively different from Liang Zhao's army. Although Liang Zhao left half a regiment to Nagasaki to control the outer eye artillery, he only had 1.5 regiments of regular troops that could be used for landing. However, this 1.5 regiments has a complete range of arms and is well equipped, so it is no problem to defeat the rabble of the shogunate. What's more, he still has the navy to rely on, and the lineup is much more luxurious than Perry's simple American East India fleet in history. Very low, Perry was also unsure. He learned from Liang Zhao and Liang Sen that the Tokugawa shogunate had a lot of troops. Yes, with the precedent of Nagasaki, the Tokugawa shogunate will not rashly start a war with us. The chances of encountering a resistance as strong as the one at the Nagasaki Game Fort in Edo are minimal. Liang Zhao gave his judgment. "I think the Japanese shogunate is now discussing how to deal with us, Colonel." "General." At this moment, Liang Sen walked into the captain's room and reported to Perry and Liang Zhao, "A patrol boat came from Uraga, asking us to leave Edo Bay." "Leave Edo Bay?" Liang Zhao just felt funny as if he had heard a joke. If he left Edo Bay now, wouldn't he have come here in vain? "Who sent the ship?" Liang Zhao asked. "It was sent by Uraga magistrate Susui Masanori," Liang Sen replied. "Tell them to go back and tell Susui Masanori that we want to talk directly with the high-level officials of the Tokugawa shogunate. He, as the Uraga magistrate, is not qualified to talk directly with us." Liang Zhao knocked on the desk and said, "If Tokugawa Ieyasu does not take the initiative to talk directly with us, then we will break into the castle tower of Edo-Oku, and this colonel will talk to him in the castle tower." "Yes." Liang Zhao took the order and went away, relaying Liang Zhao's words to the people on the patrol boat. Liang Zhao walked out of the captain's room, looked at the Japanese people watching the excitement on the Uraga coastline, and said to Perry, "General Perry, it seems that we still have to put some pressure on the Tokugawa shogunate." "Bombard Uraga?" Perry asked. "Not Uraga, but Edo." Liang Zhao shook his head and said, "Bombarding Uraga is not as effective as directly bombarding Edo." Perry nodded, agreed to Liang Zhao's proposal, and sailed the ship into Edo. After the black ships entered Edo, Each ship fired in the direction of Edo. The huge sound of the guns disturbed the people of Edo and made them panic. In the palace of Edo-oku, the 12th shogun of the shogunate, the de facto supreme ruler of Japan, Tokugawa Ieyasu, who was disturbed by the Western warships and cannons, summoned his shogun to discuss countermeasures. "General, the Americans are extremely rude. The envoys sent by me were driven back by them. They said they wanted to talk directly with our top leaders, otherwise." Susui Masanori, who looked flustered, was hesitant to speak. "What else?" Tokugawa Ieyasu's eyebrows instantly twisted into a character. "Otherwise, they will break into Edo and talk to the shogun about opening up the country and trade in the Edo castle," Susui Masanori said with his head shrunk. Ahem. Damn Americans. The weak body was so angry that he slapped his thigh. These Americans were very arrogant, but when he thought about the Nagasaki incident, they did have the capital to be arrogant. Tokugawa Ieyasu asked someone to bring the declaration of war submitted by the United States last year. This was the first time he seriously checked the declaration of war of the United States. Previously, no one in the shogunate took the U.S. declaration of war seriously, and no one thought that the U.S. would really attack Japan and Edo. Reading this declaration of war written in English, Chinese, and Japanese, Tokugawa Ieyasu was very conflicted, weighing the pros and cons of opening up the country and continuing to close the country. If we open up the country to trade with the US, Russia, Tsarist Russia, England, France and other countries will surely come one after another. How can we deal with them at that time? If we don't open up the country to trade, the US fleet will stop in Edo Bay, and their guns are pointing at Edo. Chapter 280 The Thoughts of the Tokugawa Shogunate. What good ideas do you have to make these Americans withdraw? Tokugawa Ieyasu coughed a few times and looked around at the shogunate officials in the palace. Faced with the question of how to make the Americans withdraw, these shogunate officials were also helpless, and the palace fell into silence. Seeing this, Tokugawa Ieyasu was very angry. When he was about to explode, the chief elder, Abe Masahiro, stood up and said to Tokugawa Ieyasu after sorting out his thoughts, "General, to make the Americans withdraw, we must either fight or make peace. Isn't this nonsense?" The shogunate officials, who listened to the emperor's words as if they were listening to his words, were disdainful of Abe Masahiro's remarks. "Everyone can talk nonsense. Go on." Tokugawa Ieyasu raised his hand to signal Abe Masahiro to continue. He wanted to hear what Abe Masahiro had to say. The Americans have strong ships and powerful guns, and their soldiers are very sharp. They can take Nagasaki and kidnap the Lord of Saga domain within one day. We cannot fight them, so it is difficult to force the Americans to withdraw by war. At this point, seeing that Tokugawa Ieyasu looked very unhappy, Abe Masahiro immediately added a sentence. "Even if we defeat the American army and drive them away, the shogunate's army will inevitably suffer heavy losses. How can the general deter the princes of the world at that time? There are many powerful vassals in the southwest who do not obey the orders of the shogunate. Therefore, it is not a good idea to go to war with the Americans in Edo." Abe Masahiro's words made Tokugawa Ieyasu feel a little more comfortable. Tokugawa Ieyasu nodded and said, "What the old minister said is very true. Do you have a good plan, the best plan?" "How can there be a good plan at this point?" Abe Masahiro shook his head and said, "I don't have a good plan either, but I have a middle plan." "Middle plan? Tell me about your middle plan." Tokugawa Ieyasu frowned again. "Since we can't fight, we can only make peace. If America wants to trade with us, we should verbally agree to their request," Abe Masahiro said. "What if the other party asks for a contract?" Susui Masanori was skeptical about the so-called middle policy proposed by Abe Masahiro. Judging from the Nagasaki incident, the Americans knocking on the gates of Edo are definitely not good people. They are not so easy to fool. Agree to sign a contract with them, but postpone the signing time. The United States has gone on a long expedition, and their army can't stay in Edo for long. As long as we delay for some time, the Americans will have to withdraw from Edo due to lack of food, fodder, and ammunition. As long as the Americans retreat, we will have time to reorganize the armaments of the Edo area before the next arrival of the Americans, or ask the Netherlands to mediate," Abe Masahiro said. "Does the old Chinese mean to delay time?" After thinking for a moment, Tokugawa Ieyasu felt that Abe Masahiro's method was feasible. "That's right. We are guarding Edo, and the United States has come from afar. Even though the Americans have strong ships and powerful guns, we are not without any advantages." Abe Masahiro nodded. What the old minister said is very true, but the Americans want to talk to us. Who among you is willing to go? Tokugawa Ieyasu looked around at the members of the shogunate in the palace. All the members of the shogunate were silent. Finally, Abe Masahiro stood up and said, "General, I am willing to go." Tokugawa Ieyasu cast a look of approval at Abe Masahiro. Abe Leochu is really a pillar of our shogunate. With the eyes of the shogunate, Abe Masahiro left the palace and took a small boat to the Roland to negotiate with the American representatives. This time, the one who came is Abe Masahiro. The old minister of the shogunate, Liang Zhao, reported to Liang Zhao. Liang Zhao nodded and said, "The shogunate is much more sincere this time than last time. Please ask Abe to come aboard to discuss matters. The shogunate is willing to send high-level officials to contact us directly. I believe the treaty will be signed soon," Perry said excitedly. Liang Zhao was not as optimistic as Perry. Historically, Perry's first visit to Edo did not force the shogunate to sign a trade treaty. The Japan-U.S. Amity Treaty was signed only after Perry brought 7 warships to Edo for the second time to make a friendly visit to the shogunate. Moreover, after the two sides argued, the Japan-U.S. Amity Treaty did not meet Perry's psychological expectations. The treaty did not explicitly mention the terms of trade, and the U.S. trade requirements were only partially met. It was not until 1858 that the U.S.-Japan Amity Treaty was signed at the urging of the U.S. government, and the desire for free trade between the United States and Japan was truly realized. General, you are too optimistic. It is not easy to force the shogunate government, which has been closed to the outside world for 200 years, to sign a treaty to open the country. Liang Zhao poured cold water on Perry. Opening a country for trade and mutual trade is not conducive to the rule of the shogunate, and the shogunate will not easily agree to open the country. Liang Zhao was mentally prepared for this. What is the intention of the shogunate to send senior officials to contact us directly? Perry looked down at Abe Masahiro, who was boarding the ship. To argue with us and delay time, Liang Zhao said without thinking. It is not difficult to guess what those people in the Tokugawa shogunate are thinking. Most of them want to delay time. For this reason, Liang Zhao has also made some preparations. The supply ships of the Global Group, plus the logistics ships and supplies provided by the Chinese merchants in Nagasaki Tanguin, are enough for him to spend several months in Edo and the shogunate. The ammunition of each ship and the army is also sufficient. If the Tokugawa shogunate wants to waste time by delaying time, it will be a wrong calculation. I am Abe Masahiro, the senior counselor of the shogunate. I am honored to meet the two American generals. After Abe Masahiro boarded the Roland, he bowed deeply to Liang Zhao and Perry. But when he saw Liang Zhao, who had yellow skin, black hair and black eyes, Abe Masahiro couldn't help but look at Liang Zhao a few more times. Don't be surprised, sir. I am a Tang person, and now I have become an American citizen. I am the deputy commander of the American Expeditionary Force to Japan. This negotiation will be between you and me, General Perry, Liang Zhao said to Abe Masahiro. Liang Zhao was about to translate, but Abe Masahiro had already spoken to Liang Zhao in Chinese. The general is tall and strong, with a handsome appearance. He is a rare hero in the world, so I couldn't help but take a few more glances at him, facing Abe Masahiro's rainbow fart. Liang Zhao just laughed and pointed to Edo Castle and asked, "Are there any geishas in Edo Castle?" Seeing Liang Zhao asking about geishas, Abe Masahiro was overjoyed and nodded hurriedly. Yes, I didn't expect the general to know geishas. I will let the best people in Edo Castle go to the general's warship to cheer him up. No need. If the matter between Japan and the United States cannot be negotiated on the warship, we will go to Edo Castle to discuss it next time, and then we can let the geishas in Edo Castle cheer us up, Liang Zhao said to Abe Masahiro amiably. Abe Masahiro trembled in his heart, thinking that this American general was not simple. Tables and chairs had been set up on the deck of the Roland. After Liang Zhao and Perry sat down, Liang Zhao waved his hand to signal Abe Masahiro to sit down. Mr. Abe, sit down. It's a pity that there are no geishas or exotic dancers on the Roland. I can only fire a salute to welcome Mr. Abe. As soon as Liang Zhao finished speaking, the gunners on the Roland fired their cannons. Before the gunpowder smoke had dissipated, Liang Zhao's personal soldiers fired 3 more volleys on the deck. Abe Masahiro sat in his seat, pretending to be calm, but he began to feel a little uneasy. The United States had to declare war on Japan. You Japanese have detained and abused American sailors many times, causing public resentment in the United States. In order to comply with public opinion, our American president had to declare war on you Japanese. However, our American president, His Excellency Fillmore, is not a warlike and bloodthirsty ruler, but a kind-hearted leader. The United States is also a friendly country. As long as Japan can apologize and pay compensation, and open up trade with the United States, the unpleasant things in the past can be forgiven. Liang Zhao flipped through the U.S.-Japan Treaty of Amity handed over by Hu Jinshin. After confirming that there were no problems with the terms of the treaty, he drew the treaty in front of Abe Masahiro. Chapter 281, U.S.-Japan Treaty of Amity. When Masahiro Abe opened the Treaty of Amity between the United States and Japan, the harsh and glaring contents caught his eyes. First, the Japanese shogunate compensated the American whaling crew for the loss of 1 million taels of silver and military expenses of 10 million taels of silver, a total of 11 million taels of silver. Second, Kanagawa, Nagasaki, Hakodate, Niigata, Hyogo, Edo, and Osaka were opened as trading ports. Third, the United States and Japan sent ministers to each other. The United States could station consuls in the ports, and American diplomatic envoys in Japan could travel in the interior of Japan when performing official duties. Fourth, in the ports, American citizens have the right to enter and exit freely, enjoy the right of residence, the right to rent cargo houses, the right to do business, and the right of consular jurisdiction. Fifth, respect the principle of free trade, and private trade between the United States and Japan is not subject to any restrictions and can be traded independently, and Japanese officials shall not interfere. Sixth, the tariffs between Japan and the United States must be negotiated between the Japanese side and the U.S. side. Seventh, American citizens can open banks in the ports, and the U.S. currency can circulate freely in Japan without tax. Eighth, if Japan has a dispute with other countries, the U.S. can mediate as a client at the request of Japan. Ninth, the treaty will take effect from the date of signing and will be valid for 15 years. At that time, a new treaty can be revised according to the actual situation. Abe Masahiro thought that the requirements put forward by the U.S. would be very harsh, but he did not expect that this treaty would be so harsh that he could not accept any of it. This is simply naked blackmail. Although he could not control his anger, Abe Masahiro, as a qualified member of the shogunate, did not let the impulse go to his head. He still remembered that the purpose of his trip was to stabilize and delay these Americans. The treaty involves a wide range of aspects, especially the terms of opening ports and ports, which need to be decided after the shogunate and the feudal lords have discussed. In order for the treaty to be signed smoothly, I hope the two generals will give me some time, Abe Masahiro said with a smile. We are not unreasonable people. We can give your country half a month to consider. It's just that you consider it on land, and we have to stay on the bumpy sea for half a month to wait for your results. Isn't this a bit unreasonable? Liang Zhao said. What does the general mean? Abe Masahiro asked after closing the treaty. My soldiers and I need to go ashore to rest. Of course, my America has always been a civilized and polite country. I told Abe Liaozong about this out of courtesy. Liang Zhao's attitude was very clear. He just informed Abe Masahiro that he and the officers and soldiers of the expeditionary force were going ashore, and he didn't discuss it with Abe Masahiro. Even if the Japanese shogunate disagreed, he would go ashore. This is natural. Just to avoid unnecessary misunderstandings and troubles, please let me report this to our general so that we can arrange accommodation for you and the American soldiers. I will give you two generals a reply tomorrow, Abe Masahiro said to Liang Zhao and Perry. After the negotiation, when Abe Masahiro was about to get off the ship and leave, Nobeshima Naomasa called Abe Masahiro. Mr. Abe, Mr. Kojima. Masahiro Abe paused and looked at the haggard-looking Naomasa Kojima. These Americans, especially Liang Zhao, are familiar with our national conditions. They are very shrewd and cunning, and are definitely not kind, Naomasa Kojima reminded Masahiro Abe. Mr. Kojima, there is something else behind your words. Masahiro Abe looked at the prisoner with disdain. There is something behind his words, but they are not pleasant to the ear, Naomasa Kojima said with a wry smile. Our wisest choice right now is to accept the treaty proposed by the Americans and stop the loss in time. Otherwise, the Americans will only ask for more. Nagasaki is a lesson for us, Kojima. Don't exaggerate the enemy's strength to whitewash your failure. This is a shameful and cowardly act. Abe Masahiro suddenly raised his voice. The strength of the shogunate is not something that a small saga clan like you can compare to. For these Americans, there is no essential difference between Saga clan and the shogunate. Naomasa Kojima's smile became more bitter. That's all I have to say. Please, Mr. Abe, pass this letter to you, please. As he said this, Naomasa Kojima bowed deeply to Abe Masahiro and handed over a letter with both hands. After hesitating for a moment, Abe Masahiro took the letter from Naomasa Kojima. The Japanese seem very sincere, but I always feel that this negotiation went too smoothly, Perry said, watching Abe Masahiro leave on a small boat. It's not that it went too smoothly, but that the Japanese were not sincere in this negotiation. Liang Zhao made his judgment. I feel the same way. Facing the treaty we proposed, Abe Masahiro didn't even bargain. It's really too abnormal, Perry nodded. On this point, his opinion was the same as Liang Zhao's. There is no need to bargain for a treaty that is not intended to be signed, Liang Zhao said. The Tokugawa shogunate wants to delay time with us, so we will waste time with them. It just so happens that the soldiers of the California Infantry Regiment and the Arizona Infantry Regiment also need to go ashore to rest. I also need to recuperate, so it doesn't hurt to give them some time. The next morning, the shogunate authorities quickly responded to Liang Zhao's request to go ashore to rest, allowing Liang Zhao and his troops to rest in Kanagawa, but not to enter Edo. Just like in Xiangshan, there were other garrison camps around Liang Zhao's station. The difference is that when Liang Zhao was in Xiangshan, it was the Guangdong Green Camp that monitored him, while in Kanagawa, it was the shogunate's army. Liang Zhao didn't feel uncomfortable at all. The Guangdong Green Camp in Xiangshan couldn't do anything to him, and the shogunate's army in Kanagawa naturally couldn't do anything to him. The shogunate was very understanding. Liang Zhao just mentioned the matter of geishas to Abe Masahiro. Abe Masahiro, an old man, didn't consider whether his body could handle it, and sent 20 geishas at once. However, these 20 geishas were not all for him, 10 of them were for Perry. General, please take a look. These are all Edo's warrens, proficient in piano, chess, calligraphy and painting, and have great attainments in tea ceremony and poetry. They are both beautiful and talented. Abe Masahiro introduced these geishas to Liang Zhao. Warrens are the first of all flowers. If there are too many, they will be worthless, Liang Zhao said. The courtesans in Edo are all under the general's command. If the general is not satisfied, I will send people to Osaka to select courtesans for him, Abe Masahiro said to Liang Zhao in a very obscene manner. These courtesans usually sell their art but not their bodies in Edo. Although they are all virgins, they have been trained. I think the general will like them. I hope your country can be so sincere in signing the treaty in half a month, Liang Zhao said to Abe Masahiro. Our general has always been very sincere. I hope the general can wait patiently. If you have any needs in Kanagawa, just come to me. Abe will do his best to meet the general's needs. Abe Masahiro patted his chest and said to Liang Zhao. These courtesans are enough to meet my needs. Abe, please go back. Liang Zhao glanced at the courtesans and said to Abe Masahiro. Abe Masahiro and Liang Zhao smiled at each other. Chapter 282 Navy Uniform. After Abe Masahiro left, Liang Zhao returned to the military camp and saw Deng Yan searching the geishas. If you like, you can pick some to sleep with you, Liang Zhao said to Deng Yan with a smile. Ahem, I'm worried about your safety, so I'm checking if these geishas are carrying any weapons, Deng Yan said. The Japanese are insidious and vicious, so you'd better be more careful. Tokugawa Ieyasu is not one of those brainless lower-class samurai. Assassinating me will only make the situation more difficult to handle, Liang Zhao said, but it's true that they want me to fall into the land of tenderness. Will you fall for it? Deng Yan smiled heartlessly. Although these Japanese girls have thicker powder on their faces than the city walls, they are also quite pretty. Although they are quite pretty, they can't speak the language, and they are no different from zombies when it comes to sex. It's very boring. The officers in California and Arizona haven't gotten married yet, right? Liang Zhao shook his head and said. You should ask Elvis about the Arizona Infantry Regiment. There are indeed many unmarried officers in the California Infantry Regiment. Why are you going to give them wives? Deng Yan teased. That depends on how they perform on the battlefield. The Japanese want to delay time with us and want the Tokugawa shogunate to sign the contract quickly. A war is inevitable, Liang Zhao said. If it drags on for too long, the British in Hong Kong Island in the south and the Russian Empire in the north will be involved, and things will become complicated. Liang Zhao has full confidence in dealing with Japan. What he is most worried about is that the British troublemaker will be involved. It is indeed necessary to fight quickly and decisively, so as not to have more troubles at night. Deng Yan also agreed with this. Seeing Liang Sen staring at the geishas, Liang Zhao asked Liang Sen, "Liang Sen, you are not married yet, right?" After Liang Sen came to his senses, he shook his head quickly and said, "I am not married yet. Choose one of these geishas you like to be your wife. If I remember correctly, you are 3 years older than me. It's time for you to have a family," Liang Zhao said to Liang Sen indifferently. Liang Sen thought this was a test from Liang Zhao, so he knelt down and kowtowed, saying, "This is a gift from the shogunate to the big dragon head. I dare not have any unreasonable thoughts. Get up. I have always been clear about rewards and punishments. I remember all the contributions you made in Japan," Liang Zhao said to Liang Sen, "after Japan's founding. Although I can't guarantee that you will be the American ambassador to Japan, I can still fight for a consul position for you." Liang Sen stood up and bowed deeply to Liang Zhao, wishing he could put his head on the ground. "The big dragon head has reborn for me. It is my duty to be loyal to the big dragon head. Go." Liang Zhao nodded with satisfaction. Liang Sen happily picked a geisha and left with her on his back. When Liang Zhao passed by a geisha, the geisha suddenly said, "General, I have studied Chinese studies and am proficient in Chinese. I am not a walking corpse. Let me serve you tonight." The geisha spoke fluent Chinese. Liang Zhao stopped in front of her and looked at her curiously. This geisha was taller than the other geishas. She was wearing 3-toothed clogs that were more than 10 centimeters thick. Excluding the height of the clogs, she was about 160 centimeters tall. This height was taller than most Japanese men of the same generation. Liang Zhao raised the geisha's face with his hand and looked directly into her captivating eyes. Before Liang Zhao could speak, the geisha said, "My name is Aokiya." "Very good, go wash your face and change your clothes," Liang Zhao said. "Change clothes?" Aokiya didn't understand what he meant. "I'll prepare the clothes for you." Liang Zhao immediately turned to Hu Jinjin and said, "Jinjin, ask General Perry for a clean Navy officer uniform suitable for this geisha." Yes, although Hu Jinjin was very curious about what Liang Zhao wanted the Navy officer uniform for, he adhered to the principle of asking what should be asked and not asking what should not be asked, and ran to the Navy station to ask for clothes. After washing off the thick makeup on her face and changing into an American Navy officer uniform, Aoki Ling made Liang Zhao's eyes light up. This guy looked quite heroic after changing into a Navy uniform, and Liang Zhao instantly became interested and walked into the military tent with Aoki Ling in his arms. When he woke up the next day, it was already 3 o'clock in the afternoon. When Liang Zhao put on his clothes and walked out of the military tent, he ran into Perry and Miller who were visiting. Perry and Miller saw Aoki Ling, wearing a Navy uniform and with disheveled hair, following Liang Zhao out, and they all stared at Liang Zhao with suspicion. "Colonel Liang looks good. I think he must have slept well last night," Perry mocked Liang Zhao. "Sleeping on land is definitely more comfortable than sleeping on a warship. Are there any unusual behaviors of the shogunate troops stationed around our camp?" Liang Zhao stretched and asked. "There is nothing unusual about the Japanese shogunate's army, but your habit is quite unusual," Miller also mocked Liang Zhao. "Is General Perry going to visit Tokugawa Iharu?" Liang Zhao glanced at the several carriages and gifts behind Perry and asked. "I want to meet the Supreme Ruler of Japan in person and have a direct conversation with him. I want to borrow an interpreter from you." "You know, I don't have a Japanese interpreter with me," Perry said. "During my absence, Miller will take charge of commanding the Navy on my behalf." As he said that, Perry ordered Miller, "During my absence, Colonel Liang is the commander-in-chief of the Japanese Expeditionary Force. You must obey Colonel Liang's orders." "Yes, General." Miller stood at attention and saluted Perry, answering in a sonorous and powerful voice. "Liang Sen, I can lend it to you, but since the shogunate authorities have no sincerity at the negotiation table, I'm afraid you will return empty-handed this time," Liang Zhao said with his hands behind his back. He was not optimistic about Perry's trip. "I don't know Japan as well as you do, but having more contact with the high-level officials of the shogunate authorities will also help me understand the Japanese shogunate. I also want to personally hand over the letter from President Fillmore to the shogun," Perry said. Seeing that Perry was determined to go, Liang Zhao did not stop Perry. As long as Perry did not drag him along. Not long after Perry left, Hu Jinjin came to report to Liang Zhao, "Sir, there is a Japanese samurai who wants to see you." "Japanese samurai?" But is he an official of the shogunate? Liang Zhao asked. Not an official of the shogunate. He is now kneeling at the gate of our camp. Let me pass his handwriting to you. Hu Jinshin handed over the handwriting of the Japanese samurai. Liang Zhao opened the handwriting, which was a letter to the barbarians written entirely in Chinese characters. The font looked very comfortable, and Liang Zhao had no difficulty reading it. The person who wrote this letter to the barbarians must have a very deep foundation in Chinese studies. When Liang Zhao saw the name at the end, Yoshida Shoin, he was no longer surprised. It turned out to be this guy. You can't drive in this environment now, please forgive me. Chapter 283 Yoshida Shoin. Speaking of Yoshida Shoin, you may feel unfamiliar with this name. After all, there were many talented people in Japan during the late shogunate period, and Yoshida Shoin does not seem to be the famous. Chinese people are more familiar with Yoshida Shoin students. As the initiator of the idea of opening up the country and overthrowing the shogunate, in the process of overthrowing the shogunate, Yoshida Shoin knew that he could not shake the shogunate with his own weak power. Yoshida Shoin believed that in order to overthrow the rule of the shogunate, it was necessary to open the wisdom of the Japanese people first, so he opened Matsumura Private School to give lectures. In Matsumura Private School, Yoshida Shoin cultivated relatively well-known students such as Kido Takeyoshi, Seigo Takamori, Okubo Toshimichi, Ito Hirobumi, Yamagata Aratamo, Katsura Taro, and Tarachi Masayoshi. The two prime ministers of the Meiji government and more than 30 core members were all taught by Yoshida Shoin. These people are the backbone of the Meiji government's reform and restoration. It is not an exaggeration to say that Yoshida Shoin is the godfather of modern Japan. Sir, do you want to see him or not? Hu Jinshin asked Liang Zhao. Jinshin, what impression does this man give you? Liang Zhao returned to the office and sat down. Like ordinary Japanese samurai, he seems a little crazy, but not hysterical. Hu Jinshin scratched his head and said. He is a bit stubborn. He said that if you don't want to see him, he will kneel at the door of our military camp until he dies, then let him kneel, Liang Zhao said lightly. It seems that you are quite interested in this Japanese samurai. Deng Yan, who is reading a book, put down the book in his hand and interjected. He is not a samurai, but a ronin, Liang Zhao corrected. Yoshida Shoin had already left the Choshu domain at this time. In Japan, only samurai with domain status can be called samurai, and samurai without domain status can only be called ronin. I didn't expect that there are so many people who love to learn in Japan. If the Qing dynasty could have half as many people who love to learn as Japan, why would it still be such a dead scene today? Deng Yan sighed. The Qing dynasty is the Qing dynasty of the Manchus. The Manchus ruled a large country of 400 million people with a population of 1 million. Only when the people became more ignorant could the foundation of their rule become more solid, Liang Zhao said. The day when China's wisdom was opened up was the day when the Qing dynasty fell. If Japan opens up this time and can learn advanced technology from the United States for 100 years, it will not only threaten the Qing dynasty, but also become a powerful enemy of the United States in the Pacific in the future with its wolfish ambitions. I just read the England chapter of the Universal History of All Nations again. Japan and England are quite similar. Both are island countries and have the tradition of virtual monarchs. If Japan learns the constitutional monarchy of England, it may rise. Although this trip can force the shogunate to open up the country and gain temporary benefits, it also indirectly enlightens the people of Japan. In the long run, it is unknown whether it is a blessing or a curse. California is the bridgehead of the United States in the Pacific. Once Japan rises, we in California will bear the brunt, Deng Yan expressed his concerns. On the surface, Japan's national conditions are somewhat similar to England, but Japan's core and national spirit are closer to Prussia. If Japan wants to learn, Prussia's path is more suitable for them, Liang Zhao said. Your concerns are not unreasonable. England and Tsarist Russia have been eyeing Japan. Even if America does not come to open Japan's door, the British and Russians will come. Japan's local resources are relatively scarce. England has taken the lead and occupied a large number of fertile lands around the world to provide blood transfusions for its own country. Japan's desire to follow the path of England's rise is no longer feasible. As long as the roots of Japan's rise can be cut off, Japan will never be able to turn over, let alone threaten California and the United States. Cut off the roots of Japan. Deng Yan was a little puzzled. Yes, use Japan to control Japan's economic lifeline, and make Japan's economy dependent on the United States, Liang Zhao nodded. It's just that this is a long-term task. The Tokugawa shogunate is already a dead body in the grave. After the signing of the Treaty of Amity between the United States and Japan, the collapse of the shogunate is only a matter of time. After the signing, we must find the forces that can replace the shogunate to rule Japan in the future as soon as possible and support them. Only then can we gain economic benefits in Japan for a long time. In your opinion, among the powerful vassals in the Japanese archipelago, who can replace the Tokugawa shogunate? Deng Yan asked curiously. Satsuma, Choshu, and Toi, Liang Zhao said without hesitation. Yoshida Shoin is from the Choshu domain. Although he has left the domain, the lord of the Choshu domain, Moritaka Shikida, still appreciates him very much. Perhaps he can be used. Why don't such knowledgeable people take him in directly for their own use like they did to subdue Liang Sen? Deng Yan said puzzledly. Didn't Jinshin say that this person is very crazy? I can use a madman, but I can't subdue a madman, Liang Zhao said. A madman who pursues his ideals without hesitation is a very scary existence in any era. Yoshida Shoin is such a person. Yoshida Shoin has always placed Japan's interests above any other interests, including personal interests, and even personal life and death. Just for this reason, Liang Zhao could not use Yoshida Shoin for his own use. It is impossible to tie up this mad dog, but it may be possible to use this mad dog to bite people. Just when Liang Zhao stationed troops in Kanagawa and Perry visited Edo to meet Tokugawa Ieyasu, thousands of miles away in the capital city. After a long wait, Pan Shichen, Pan Zhangwei, Wu Yuanhu and others and the American mission to the Qing dynasty were finally summoned. American envoy Walker pays homage to the Emperor of the Great Qing dynasty. Long live the Emperor of the Great Qing dynasty. Hawk, who has been hanging out in the Loyalty Society for a long time, is quite proficient in Chinese. Walker prostrated himself on the ground and loudly wished the Emperor of the Great Qing dynasty a long life, which made the young Emperor Xianfeng very happy. I have always heard that the barbarians in the Western countries do not know etiquette. Today, it seems that not all Western countries do not know etiquette. The envoys of the United States are quite polite. Where is the United States? I have heard that there are England, France, and Russia in the West. But this is the first time I have heard of the United States. Has the United States ever paid tribute to the Qing dynasty before? Your Majesty, the United States is thousands of miles away from the Qing dynasty. It is the largest country in America. Its territory is very large, only inferior to England and Russia, Pan Shichen reported to Emperor Xianfeng. The United States has always heard that the grace of our emperor is vast and the prestige of the Qing dynasty is spread all over the world. It admires the Qing dynasty very much, so it sent envoys to pay tribute. This is the first time that the United States has come to Beijing to pay tribute, hearing that the United States is a big country, not an unknown small country, and it is the first time to pay tribute. Emperor Xianfeng was even happier. This is the first time since he ascended the throne that a big Western country has come to the Qing dynasty to pay tribute. Your Majesty, the last time foreigners paid tribute to our great Qing was during the reign of Emperor Qianlong, and your Majesty had just ascended the throne. This is an auspicious sign, and the day of the revival of our great Qing is at hand. Pan Zhangwei pressed down the hat on his head to make the false braid on his head more stable, and then offered words of praise. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 284, Deceiving the Public. Rewards, all of them are very generous. The Qing dynasty was not peaceful since Emperor Xianfeng ascended the throne. There were aggressive Western powers such as Britain, France and Russia outside, and the Taiping Rebellion in full swing inside. This uprising was getting more and more intense and sweeping across the southeast half of the country. At this time, the Qing dynasty was already old and weak, and it was in a precarious situation. Pan Zhangwei's words touched the heart of Emperor Xianfeng. Thank you, Your Majesty. The recipients kowtowed in a hurry to thank him. Even Walker, who didn't know why the emperor of the Qing dynasty was so happy, followed Pan Shichen, Pan Zhangwei and others to express his gratitude verbally. Your Majesty, this time America has paid tribute to a lot of interesting things. Why don't you take a look and appreciate the Western scenery? Taking advantage of Emperor Xianfeng's excitement, Pan Zhangwei said hurriedly. I have heard that there are many strange and ingenious things in the West. I want to see what strange things there are in the West, Emperor Xianfeng said. After obtaining the permission of Emperor Xianfeng, the tribute from America was carried outside the Hall of Supreme Harmony. The tribute from America this time mainly included 100 Dries needle guns, 100 Walter and 1,851 rifles, 10 American cannons, a miniature model of the Pioneer train, a walking beam steam engine, and some small items. It can be said that the guns, locomotives and steam engines placed in front of the Hall of Supreme Harmony at this time represent the highest level of American military industry and steam engine technology. This is a Western fast gun, fast and accurate, and all Western soldiers are equipped with this. This is a new Western cannon, which not only shoots far and fast, but also can fire shrapnel, which is very powerful. This is a Western train, which can travel by itself without human power and travels very fast. This is a Western steamship, which can travel without relying on wind power, and can come and go freely whether it is downstream or upstream, Pan Zhengwei and others introduced to Emperor Xianfeng one by one. If the soldiers of the Qing dynasty were equipped with these foreign guns and cannons, wouldn't the Taiping rebels in the south be defeated overnight? The young Emperor Xianfeng said, looking at these tributes thoughtfully. Your Majesty is wise, Pan Zhengwei said. Your Majesty, our Qing dynasty was founded on horseback archery, which is the foundation of our 8 banners. We must not lose this foundation. Seeing that Emperor Xianfeng was interested in these foreign guns and cannons, Grand Secretary Su Shun hurried forward and said. The other 8 banners dignitaries also echoed and denounced these foreign guns and cannons as unorthodox. Only Yizin remained silent. Your Majesty, I think if all the children of the 8 banners were trained in foreign guns, wouldn't it be useless? Xing Jelinkin, who was beside Emperor Xianfeng, said. Foreign guns are small and if they fall into the hands of people with ulterior motives, they will cause endless harm. But these foreign cannons can be used. Xing Jelinkin was very averse to foreign guns, but he still showed some interest in foreign cannons. It seems that the 8 banners have not been abolished. Pan Zhengwei secretly complained in his heart, but this is something that can only be understood and not brought to the table. Even if Pan Zhengwei was unhappy, he had to keep these words to himself. He was just an imperial merchant. The monk king was now a favorite minister. Not only was he favored by the emperor, but he was also a member of the 8 banners. The status of the two in the heart of Emperor Xianfeng could be said to be a world of difference. Pan Zhengwei was not stupid enough to offend Xing Jelinkin. Seeing so many people dislike foreign guns and cannons, Emperor Xianfeng felt a little disappointed. Pan Zhengwei immediately asked someone to start the train model to relieve Emperor Xianfeng's fatigue. Emperor Xianfeng saw that the train started by itself and found it very interesting. He asked, what is the use of this thing in Western countries? Reporting to the emperor, trains are used to transport goods and passengers in Western countries. Their transportation capacity is greater than that of carriages and their speed is faster than that of ships. It is very convenient, Pan Zhengwei introduced. If we can build a railway along the canal, whether it is drought or flood, whether the canal is open or blocked, the grain and tribute from the south can all be transported directly to the capital without any obstruction. It only takes 3 or 4 days for the goods from Jiangning to reach the capital, which is very convenient. Although the train model was reduced to the size of a mule, the noise made by the train was still very loud when it was running. The Manchu dignitaries who saw the train for the first time all showed horrified expressions. Some Manchus even turned their heads away and didn't look at the train that was emitting black smoke. Pan Zhengwei, you are just a businessman. How dare you spread rumors and confuse the people in front of the emperor? San Yisheng, the chief military minister, immediately jumped out and rebuked. The canal connects the north and the south, and is the lifeline of our great Qing. It is the livelihood of millions of canal workers. If this damn railway is built, how can millions of canal workers make a living? If the canal workers lose their livelihood, won't the world be in chaos? And what is this damn steam engine? Humph! It doesn't require manpower. Without manpower, won't the people have nothing to do? If the people have nothing to do, our great Qing will surely collapse. After saying this, San Yisheng bowed to Emperor Xianfeng. Your Majesty, I ask your Majesty to kill Pan Zhengwei, the evil businessman with evil intentions, to correct people's hearts. Your Majesty, spare my life. I have no such intention, and God can see it clearly. Pan Zhengwei's forehead immediately broke out in cold sweat, and his back felt cold. Pan Shicheng and Wu Yuanhe also knelt down in a hurry to confess their crimes. Walker on the side was stunned. He didn't know why these higher-ranking officials and the Emperor of the Great Queen were still in a happy mood inside the palace, but became tense outside the palace. Your Majesty, today is a great day for the American envoys to pay tribute. It is not appropriate to resort to war on such a festive day. Seeing this, Yi, who was standing beside Emperor Xianfeng, stepped forward to help Pan Zhengwei and others. Kneel down and pay your respects. Emperor Xianfeng felt very disappointed. With a gloomy face, he turned and entered the Hall of Supreme Harmony. After leaving the Forbidden City, Pan Zhengwei breathed a sigh of relief. His head was finally saved. Tingayu, I think you have been in California for too long. Your mind is confused. Have you forgotten what we should say and what we should not say? Pan Shichen scolded Pan Zhengwei. The merchants in Guangzhou, are just the moneybags of the court. Moneybags should have the awareness of moneybags. It feels like a lifetime ago after going to America and returning to the Qing dynasty. Wu Yuanhe also sighed. Tingayu, you and I have lived for most of our lives, but we didn't expect that we couldn't see things as clearly as a young man like Liang Zhao. We lost the bet with Liang Zhao. This guy is really accurate in seeing things. Wu Yuanhe recalled the bet he made with Liang Zhao when he returned to the Qing dynasty, and sighed at Liang Zhao's foresight. What kind of young man is Liang Zhao? This guy is smarter than the two of us combined. I even doubt whether this guy has become a spirit, Pan Zhengwei said. I have read Liang Zhao's Universal Mirror for All Nations over and over again, and I have a lot of insights. It is a rare person to be able to write this book in his 20s, Pan Shichen said, holding the walnuts in his hand. This guy should be in Japan now, but I don't know how well he's doing in conquering Japan. Last year, I bought a plantation in Texas, but the local black slaves are very expensive. It would be great if I could capture some Japanese slaves in Japan and plant cotton in the plantation. After saying that, Wu Yuanhe asked Pan Shichen and Pan Zhengwei, when will you return to Guangzhou? Chapter 285 My patience is limited. We owe Prince Gong a huge favor this time. Before returning to Guangzhou, let's visit Prince Gong to express our gratitude, Pan Shichen said. Compared with other princes, Prince Gong seems to be less averse to foreign things, Wu Yuanhe said. At the same time, Edo, Japan. After visiting Edo, Perry returned to the temporary military camp in Kanagawa with disappointment. As Liang Zhao expected, Perry did not make much progress on this trip. As the commander-in-chief of the expeditionary force, Perry hoped that this expedition could be successfully completed with himself as the leader, rather than becoming Liang Zhao's foil. This was his motivation for visiting Edo. He did not want to become a transparent person in this operation. The attitude of the Tokugawa shogunate made Perry realize that it would be difficult to achieve the goal of getting Japan to sign the Japan-US Amity Treaty as soon as possible by relying on him, Perry, and the Navy alone. Why are there two Japanese kneeling at a gate of the military camp? Perry, who had just returned to the Kanagawa military camp, went straight to Liang Zhao's military tent. Two studious Japanese ronin. Liang Zhao looked at Perry with a bitter face, knowing that Perry's trip to Edo this time did not make much progress. This was also within Liang Zhao's expectations. His Japan-US Amity Treaty was much more stringent than the historical treaty of the same name, and it could even be said that they were two completely different treaties. The Tokugawa shogunate would not easily sign the Japan-US Amity Treaty unless it was absolutely necessary. Apart from other clauses, the huge indemnity of 11 million taels of silver alone was enough to bankrupt the Japanese shogunate. The Japanese were particularly interested in the gifts I brought them. We also played the game of riding a train together. General Tokugawa even asked two fat men to perform wrestling for me. But when it came to the treaty, their attitude was still evasive, Perry said. You are right. These Japanese really have no sincerity in negotiation. They just want to delay time. Since the shogunate authorities can't make up their minds, let us help them make up their minds. Liang Zhao stood up and looked at the large-scale map of the Edo area behind him. Since the shogunate leaders insisted on delaying time, he let them know that Liang Zhao was not a very patient person. Do you want to put pressure on Japan through war? Perry asked. Is there a better way, General Perry? Liang Zhao asked Perry in return. Perry fell into silence. After a short silence, Perry said, before I set out, Mr. Fillmore told me to try to resolve the dispute with Japan in a peaceful way. As the top of the Navy, Perry knew that the current financial situation of the U.S. federal government was not enough to start a high-intensity war with a medium-sized country. Japan's military did not leave Perry a bad impression. Perry even believed that if Japan could get military assistance from the British like Mexico, it would definitely be more difficult to deal with than the Mexican army. It's easy to start a war, but it's more difficult to end a war than to start one. The shogunate is not a small Hizen domain, Perry added. Our military force is not very sufficient. You want to avoid bloodshed, but you also want the Tokugawa shogunate to surrender and sign the contract as soon as possible. General Perry. Don't you think your idea is very contradictory? Liang Zhao knew what Perry was worried about, and he said in a very firm tone. Fillmore's instructions to me are that when necessary, the Japanese problem can be solved by force, and now is the necessary time. Forcing Japan to open up its country, opening up the Far East market, and projecting the influence of the United States to the Far East is a strategic idea you have been brewing for many years. Now whether your strategic idea can be successfully realized depends entirely on your thoughts. Perry stood up and paced back and forth. The expedition to Japan was the most important thing in his life. Perry regarded the expedition to Japan as even more important than increasing the steam rate of the Navy. It was really a pity to give up halfway now. Perry was not sure whether the politicians in Washington and Fillmore would be satisfied with the current achievements in Japan. After thinking for a long time, Perry finally made up his mind, and his erratic eyes became firm. Since the Tokugawa shogunate is unwilling to sign the contract, let these barbaric Japanese monkeys see the power of civilization. This is the impression I have of General Perry. Seeing Perry's attitude, Liang Zhao smiled. Even without Perry's support, he still had the ability to force the Tokugawa shogunate to bow its head and sign the contract, but with Perry's support, the process would undoubtedly be easier, which is better than fighting alone. What support does the army need? The Navy will give the army strong support to the greatest extent. Perry returned to his seat and sat down. The army needs the Navy brothers to share some of the pressure for us. Liang Zhao never gave up the plan to use force against the Tokugawa shogunate. He pointed to the map and said, as long as the Navy's warships can block the Edo port and put pressure on the Tokugawa shogunate, the rest will be left to our army to solve. Liang Zhao only needed Perry to help him contain part of the shogunate's troops and reduce his pressure on land. He believed that the officers and soldiers of the California Infantry Regiment and the Arizona Infantry Regiment were capable of solving the remaining problems. The more than 10,000 shogunate soldiers stationed around the Kanagawa military camp were undoubtedly the first targets that Liang Zhao had to solve and eliminate. Only by eliminating these shogunate soldiers could Liang Zhao's goal of marching into Edo be achieved. As for tactics, there was no need for complicated tactics to deal with these medieval armies that were an all-round generational differences from himself. Everything was normal in the Kanagawa military camp, and the U.S. military was still the same as usual, except for training and resting. The shogunate troops stationed in Kanagawa did not realize that these American troops would soon become their nightmare. The Navy and the Army simultaneously attacked the shogunate troops near Kanagawa. Due to the disparity in the maritime strength of the two sides, the Tokugawa shogunate had actually given up the right to control the sea, but only arranged some fire ships around the Kanagawa coastline, hoping that these fire ships could burn the huge black ships around Kanagawa with suicide charges. But this was just wishful thinking of the Tokugawa shogunate. At the beginning of the war, a considerable number of simple fire ships were torn to pieces by naval guns. The shogunate sailors' plan of fire attack was even more fantastic. These shogunate fire ships did not even have the chance to get close to the black ships, and could only watch them get farther and farther away from them. The black ships were sailing against the wind, and the huge paddle wheels on both sides of the black ships could easily sail against the wind driven by the steam engine. The shogunate sailors' fire ships were basically fishing boats filled with firewood, and they relied entirely on wind and manpower to travel. Even if the shogunate sailors on the ship used all their strength, it was difficult to get close to the black ships. In the waters near Kanagawa, the burning Japanese fire ships were like fireflies floating on the sea. Chapter 286 Generation Gap. What a bunch of people who don't know how to live or die. Sven stood on the deck, looking at the Japanese fire ships floating on the Kanagawa Bay and said. Next to him stood the armed employees of Global Shipping Company. Since the number of dresser needle guns was limited, there were only 3,000. Liang Zhao gave priority to equipping them to the California Infantry Regiment and the Arizona Infantry Regiment. The employees of Global Shipping Company were equipped with Walter M1851 rifles produced in Sacramento, California. Although this gun was not fired by a striker, its performance was not much worse than that of the dresser needle gun. In some aspects, it was even better than the dresser needle gun. For example, the metal shell-rimmed bullet used by this gun was more resistant to moisture on a wet ship than the paper shell bullet used by the dresser needle gun, and was more suitable for these crew members. These crew members equipped with rifles were responsible for killing the shogunate sailors on the fireships at close range. But they did not have many opportunities to shoot. Most of the Japanese fireships were sunk by the ship's guns before they approached them. The counterattack on land was more sharp than the counterattack on the sea. Liang Zhao used all the artillery to bombard the shogunate army's camp. Faced with a sudden attack of the American army, the generals of the shogunate were at a loss. They couldn't believe that the American army, with less than 3,000 people, dared to take the initiative to attack the shogunate army, which was 7 or 8 times their number. In fact, Liang Zhao could not even put 2,000 combat troops into the attack. He had only 1.5 regiments of regular troops. Counting the artillery companies and engineering companies of the 2 regiments, and the cavalry company of the California Infantry Regiment, the number of people did not even reach 2,000. The rest were the chores responsible for logistics in the Kanagawa military camp, but the shogunate army mistakenly thought they were combat soldiers. The shogunate army finally organized 3,000 archers and musketeers with Japanese bows and musketeers to approach Liang Zhao's army, hoping to use the advantage of numbers to suppress the attack of Liang Zhao's army. Unexpectedly, the U.S. military opened fire first outside their range, and the 5 companies of the California Infantry Regiment faced the 3,000 archers and musketeers of the shogunate. Facing the shogunate archers and musketeers who were 6 times their number, the officers and soldiers of the California Infantry Regiment did not panic at all. They were loading and firing in an orderly manner like a factory machine, mechanically and skillfully repeating the work they had trained thousands of times. At this time, they were more like emotionless bullet launchers than people. Their only task was to shoot the bullets in the barrel. 5 companies of soldiers fought with a momentum of 3,000 musketeers. The shogunate army had never fought with Liang Zhao before, and they did not know the weapons equipped by Liang Zhao's army. In the eyes of the shogunate army, Liang Zhao's army was holding more sophisticated muskets. These ignorant shogunate soldiers wanted to take advantage of the gap between the enemies reloading to approach the enemy, but they did not expect that before they took a few steps, the enemy's next round of volleys hit us head-on, and in an instant, another row of shogunate soldiers were harvested by the ruthless rain of metal bullets like wheat in autumn. The shogunate army had never seen such a battle before. The formation was soon disrupted, and the morale collapsed. The remaining shogunate archers and musketeers fled. The 2,000 shogunate cavalry wanted to use their mobility advantage to break through the flanks of Liang Zhao's army. Soon, the Arizona Infantry Regiment deployed on both wings crushed the attempt of these shogunate cavalry with Idris needle guns in their hands. Compared with cavalry, the soldiers of the Arizona Infantry Regiment prefer to call these shogunate cavalry monkeys riding dogs. The short Japanese cavalry riding on short Japanese horses looks very funny. From a distance, they really look more like monkeys riding dogs, without the majesty of cavalry. The battle near the Kanagawa military camp ended quickly, and the battle was even faster than Liang Zhao expected. I still overestimated the combat effectiveness of the shogunate army. Liang Zhao rode on a horse with a telescope in his hand, and what came into his sight was the shogunate army that was defeated like a mountain. This is not a war, this is simply a one-sided massacre. King Enz, who was watching the battle, was amazed. He had never fought bandits in Guangdong as easily as Liang Zhao fought the shogunate army. Before the war, King Enz was not optimistic about the prospects of the U.S. military. He believed that although the U.S. military had powerful guns and cannons, the gap in manpower between them and the shogunate army was too big, and it would be difficult to defeat the shogunate army. King Enz even felt that Liang Zhao was really hitting a rock with an egg. This battle completely overturned his understanding of war. It must have been so easy for the British to fight the Qing dynasty 10 years ago. Today, the war has developed to the point where it is no longer the number of people that determines the outcome of the war, but technology. Liang Zhao put down the telescope in his hand. The feudal army of the Middle Ages was vulnerable in front of the modern army. The disadvantages of the gap in technology and civilization can no longer be made up by simply quantity. Technology. King Enz didn't know what Liang Zhao meant by this word he had never heard of before. He thought it meant artifacts. Kangens thought that if the Guangdong Navy could have equipment like Liang Zhao's army, even if only a small part of the soldiers had such equipment, not only would the Guangdong coastal defense be safe, but there would be no need to worry about the long-haired people who were causing a lot of trouble and making the Green Camp in Guangdong, Guangxi, and Hubei helpless. Liang Zhao even had half a regiment of California Infantry Regiment soldiers and a cavalry company that he had not used. These troops were originally intended to be used as the reserve troops for the final battle, but he did not expect the shogunate army to be so vulnerable. They were not as good as the army of his Saga domain. Seeing the shogunate army being defeated, the officers and soldiers of the reserve team were itching to go to battle. The company commanders of each company asked to go to battle. If they did not go to battle, they would not even have the chance to capture prisoners. Seeing that the shogunate army was doomed and it was almost impossible to organize an effective counterattack, Liang Zhao only left 2 companies to be responsible for vigilance and sent the remaining troops to defeat the last shogunate army that was resisting. In less than half a day, the 20,000 shogunate troops near Kanagawa collapsed. As for how many shogunate soldiers were killed, Liang Zhao did not even have time to count. After tying up more than 1,500 captured shogunate prisoners and handing them over to employees of Global Shipping Company for custody, Liang Zhao led the main force to advance towards Edo. Speed is of the essence. The sooner the troops arrive at Edo Castle, the greater the psychological shock to the Tokugawa shogunate's high-ranking officials. The troops deployed by the Tokugawa shogunate around Kanagawa are already the elite forces under the shogunate. The remaining elite troops of the shogunate are all hiding in Edo Castle. The probability of encountering a counterattack and ambush on the road is very small. Liang Zhao does not think that under the pressure of the bombardment of the American East India Fleet in Edo Port, the shogunate's high-ranking officials have the courage to go all in and release the elite troops in Edo Castle to fight him in the field. Of course, if the shogunate army wants to fight in the field, it is exactly what he wants. As Liang Zhao expected, after defeating the army near Kanagawa, Liang Zhao marched forward all the way, as if he was in an empty land, and arrived at Edo Castle without encountering any decent resistance. At this time, the people in Edo Castle were in a panic and chaos. The shogunate leaders did not expect the American army to arrive at Edo Castle, but they did not expect the American army to arrive so quickly, and to advance by land and sea. Obviously, the shogunate leaders underestimated the strength of the U.S. military. The frail Tokugawa Ieyasu could even see the American flag fluttering in the wind at the foot of Edo Castle, from afar. This war was completely beyond Tokugawa Ieyasu's cognition. Chapter 287, Alliance under the City. The U.S. military was approaching Edo Castle, and the Tokugawa shogunate's high-level officials had mixed feelings. Although the Tokugawa shogunate's high-level officials strictly blocked the news of the defeat in Kanagawa, there were too many remnants of the defeated army who fled back to Edo Castle from Kanagawa. This was no longer something the Tokugawa shogunate could block if it wanted to. The news of the defeat in Kanagawa spread like wildfire, and the entire Edo Castle was lifeless and shrouded in a haze. The news of the defeat in Nagasaki more than a month ago and the capture of the feudal lord had just reached Edo. The nobles of the Tokugawa shogunate, as well as the peddlers in the wine shops and tea houses, were still skeptical about this matter. They believed that the rumors were exaggerated and exaggerated the strength of the American army. Now, the bloody and cruel reality is nakedly laid out in front of all the Edo people. The Edo people no longer have any reason to insist on the combat effectiveness of the American army. Everyone laughed at Naomi Shimashima and called him a coward. It's a shame. Now it seems that Naomi Shimashima is the most sober person. Abe Masahiro behind Tokugawa Ieyasu regretted not listening to Naomi Shimashima advice. If he had listened to Naomi Shimashima advice, the situation would not have developed to such a bad point. It's a pity that there is no regret medicine in the world. A cool breeze blew in his face. Standing on the top of the city, Tokugawa Ieyasu stared blankly at the American army waiting in battle array under the city. The rumbling sound of artillery outside Edo Port was endless. Thinking of the U.S.-Japan Amity Treaty that made him furious, and then thinking of the defeat in Kanagawa not long ago, Tokugawa Ieyasu's mind was blank, and his eyes were also dark. In a trance, Tokugawa Ieyasu felt a surging heat wave extending from his abdomen to his chest, and finally gushed out of his mouth uncontrollably. Desperate Tokugawa Ieyasu collapsed to the ground and soon lost consciousness. When Tokugawa Ieyasu regained consciousness, he found himself lying on the bed in the Aku. Abe, elder, The first thing he did after regaining consciousness was to call Abe Masahiro. General, Abe Masahiro stood in front of Tokugawa Ieyaru's bed, waiting for Tokugawa Ieyaru's instructions. You will go to the American military camp and negotiate peace with the Americans. The Americans are so eager to attack Edo because of the treaty, Tokugawa Ieyaru said to Abe Masahiro, except for the first indemnity, which we really can't afford, the rest of the treaty can be negotiated. Yes, Abe Masahiro said with a bitter face. This is not an easy job. Even if the peace negotiation is successful, Abe Masahiro will have to bear the infamy for all eternity. His reputation may be worse than that of Nabeshima Naomasa, and he will be regarded as a traitor. Nabeshima Naomasa only lost Nagasaki, but Abe Masahiro lost the entire shogunate. However, some things always need to be done by someone, and Abe Masahiro took on this tough job without hesitation. Liang Zhao and Perry are both people who can be negotiated. Between the two, Abe Masahiro played some tricks and chose to negotiate with Perry. Abe Masahiro has dealt with Liang Zhao and Perry. Among these two people, Abe Masahiro believes that Perry's understanding of Japan is far less than Liang Zhao's, and talking to Perry may reduce the losses. Moreover, as far as he knows, Perry is the highest general sent to Japan by the United States, so it is reasonable to talk to Perry. Even if the negotiation is not successful in the end, this trip can cause Perry and Liang Zhao to have a rift, which is also good for the shogunate. Perry was very happy that the Tokugawa shogunate sent envoys to negotiate peace, which was exactly what he wanted. However, Abe Masahiro still underestimated the weight of national interests in Perry's heart. Of course, Perry could sign the U.S.-Japan Treaty of Amity with Japan under his leadership, but at the same time, Perry also knew that Liang Zhao knew the Japanese shogunate and the Japanese better than he did. Only by letting Liang Zhao come to talk together can the United States gain the greatest benefits in Japan. In the face of national interests and personal interests, Perry chose the former without hesitation. Of course, there were practical reasons for Perry's choice. He did not have a translator who was proficient in Japanese. Upon learning that Abe Masahiro had boarded the Mississippi to try to negotiate with Perry, Liang Zhao was furious and could not help but curse, "Abe Masahiro, this old fox, is so fucking cunning." After cursing, Liang Zhao handed over the command of the army to Deng Yan, and immediately took Liang Centro to port and boarded the Mississippi. Seeing Liang Zhao's arrival, Abe Masahiro's mood fell to the bottom. "How are you, Mr. Abe?" Liang Zhao smiled and met Abe Masahiro. "Colonel, how are you?" Abe Masahiro bowed deeply to Liang Zhao and said with a wooden expression. After sitting down, Liang Zhao did not waste words with Abe Masahiro and went straight to the point. "When we first met, I told Abe Laozhong that when we meet again, we will sign more than just these terms. As long as your country can make some concessions on the compensation, Abe will become the eternal sinner and sign this treaty on behalf of General Tokugawa. We really can't afford so much silver," Abe Masahiro said. "Although our army has just experienced the defeat in Kanagawa, our shogunate still has 100,000 troops in Edo. If your country attacks Edo by force, it will be difficult to get an advantage." Obviously, Abe Masahiro was talking nonsense. According to the intelligence he collected, the total number of troops that the shogunate could control was only 60,000 to 80,000. This was the data before the defeat in Kanagawa, and now the data will be even less. At this time, there may not even be 50,000 shogunate troops in Edo Castle. "It's not unacceptable to reduce some of the indemnity," Perry whispered to Liang Zhao. This treaty completely met Perry's psychological expectations, and Perry decided to stop while he was ahead. Even if there was no indemnity clause in this U.S.-Japan Amity Treaty, as long as the Tokugawa shogunate signed it, Perry could explain it to the President, Congress, and the Navy Department after returning home. Fillmore and Congress were both pragmatic about the expedition to Japan, and their only request to Perry and Liang Zhao was to open Japan's door. Obviously, they had exceeded their goal with almost negligible losses. "Not a penny less in indemnity," Liang Zhao said to Perry. After speaking, Liang Zhao turned his head away and laughed at Abe Masahiro as if he had heard a big joke. "Ho ha ho ha, let alone 100,000 troops, even if your Tokugawa shogunate has 1,000,000 troops, they are just the dead souls under the guns of my American army. Not worth mentioning. If you are still so stubborn, then please go back and we will fight again. My America has 1,000,000 soldiers, 1,000 warships, and countless guns. It will only take 10 days for our reinforcements to arrive in Edo from America. By then, Hundreds of warships and hundreds of thousands of American soldiers will be stationed in Edo. What we want is not just a mere compensation of 10 million taels of silver and the opening of the country to trade. Chapter 288, Income in Exchange. I heard that Colonel Liang was once a Qing citizen. Since he is a Qing citizen, I believe that Colonel Liang also knows that if you push a rabbit into a corner, it will bite. Abe Masahiro continued to be stubborn. If the American army comes in full force to destroy our empire, the people of the empire must die to protect the empire's territory. By then, it is unknown how many American soldiers will be buried in the empire. As the saying goes, knowing yourself and the enemy, you can fight 100 battles without danger. Abe Masahiro is very familiar with the affairs in Japan and even the major events in East Asia. This is beyond doubt. Although the Tokugawa shogunate is corrupt, there are still many knowledgeable people in the shogunate, and Abe Masahiro is one of them. But Abe Masahiro still lacks understanding of America. Japan has only one channel to obtain information about America, and that is through the Dutch. But America is isolated in America, far away from the European continent. In addition, New York and other places were colonies that the Dutch had lost, and the Dutch still feel resentful about it. It would be a bit difficult for the Dutch, who understand America, to provide Japan with relatively objective and accurate information. Therefore, the information about America that the Japanese obtained from the Dutch was second-hand information processed by the Dutch. The America that the Japanese understand is, to be precise, the America in the eyes of the Dutch. Although the Japanese shogunate authorities are not as ignorant as the Qing dynasty during the Opium War 10 years ago, their understanding of the outside world is ultimately limited due to the channels for obtaining information. Compared with Abe Masahiro, Liang Zhao's understanding of Japan is more thorough. I'm afraid it's hard to find another person in the world who understands Japan better than him. Whether it's the channels for obtaining information or the degree of understanding between the two, they are extremely asymmetric. Suffer from death? Is it the Japanese people led by the shogunate who will suffer from death, or the feudal lords who will also suffer from death? Liang Zhao sneered. Abe Masahiro was shocked. He tried his best to stay calm and said through gritted teeth, "Of course it is the tens of millions of people of the empire. I'm afraid this is just your wishful thinking," Liang Zhao said indifferently. The one respected by the Japanese people is the emperor, not the shogun. Tokugawa Ieyasu is just a common lord of the feudal domains, nothing more. He, Tokugawa Ieyasu, can be the common lord of the feudal domains, so why can't the feudal lords of the southwestern feudal domains do the same? What do you mean by that? Abe Masahiro heard the hidden meaning in Liang Zhao's words. If the Tokugawa shogunate is unwilling to sign the Treaty of Amity between the United States and Japan, with the strong national strength of the United States, we can support any of the southwestern feudal domains and replace the Tokugawa shogunate, and sign with us instead of the Tokugawa shogunate, Liang Zhao said slowly. If the Tokugawa shogunate is willing to sign, America's powerful ships, cannons and fast guns will be available to you as long as you pay enough money. With American guns and cannons, Shogun Tokugawa will not worry about the instability of Japan's position as the common leader. Please tell Shogun Tokugawa that whether to be friends with America or enemies with America depends on his decision. Although Japan before the Meiji Restoration was a unified country, it was only a superficial unity. At this time, the Tokugawa shogunate's ability to integrate and organize Japan was not even as good as that of the Qing dynasty. Japan became a centralized country only after the abolition of feudal domains and the establishment of prefectures. Abe Masahiro's statement that the people of the imperial country must die to protect the territory of the imperial country is simply nonsense. Japan in the Edo period is not Japan in the period of the Japanese Empire. Before the awakening of national consciousness in modern times, whether these so-called people of the imperial country recognized the imperial country was a matter worth discussing. As the actual supreme ruler of Japan today, Tokugawa Ieyasu is at best a common leader of the Japanese princes. Liang Zhao's words obviously hit the soft spot of Abe Masahiro, or Tokugawa Ieyasu's soft spot. The ruler is never afraid of a powerful foreign enemy, but the overthrow of his own rule. This applies to the Qing dynasty and the Tokugawa shogunate. Our general has always been very sincere in negotiations with the United States, but we are a small country with limited financial resources. We really can't afford to pay the 11 million taels of silver. With a vast territory, large number of people and huge wealth of the Qing dynasty, it is still difficult to raise the 21 million silver dollars in the Jiangning article, let alone us, Abe Masahiro said very earnestly. Liang Zhao knew that what Abe Masahiro said was not a lie. 11 million taels of silver was indeed beyond the ability of the shogunate authorities to bear. However, on the issue of compensation, Liang Zhao did not intend to give in, but asked for more compensation. 11 million taels of silver was a month ago, and now it is 15 million taels of silver, Liang Zhao corrected. As he spoke, Liang Zhao threw the already revised U.S.-Japan Treaty of Amity in front of Abe Masahiro. A month ago, he told Abe Masahiro in person that if they refused to sign the treaty agreed upon on the Roland, the Tokugawa shogunate authorities would not sign this treaty when they arrived in Edo. Liang Zhao was a man of his word, and he always did what he said. There was no way Abe Masahiro could give a discount on the treaty. 15 million taels of silver, Abe Masahiro's face showed an almost desperate expression. We can't even afford to pay 11 million taels of silver, let alone 15 million taels of silver? We are very sincere about the negotiations, but Your Excellency the Colonel must also consider the actual situation in Japan. We can understand your country's difficulties. In view of this, we allow your country to repay the indemnity in the form of goods instead of silver, or even people instead of silver, Liang Zhao said with a very kind and friendly smile. Replace people with goods, replace goods with money. Abe Masahiro understood what it meant. This was a method, but he didn't understand what it meant to replace people with money. The women of the empire are also the property of the empire. Liang Zhao's true intentions were exposed. I understand. I will convey this to our general. Abe Masahiro stood up, with a sad look on his face. Please General Perry and Colonel Liang stop bombarding Edo. We will give you a reply as soon as possible. After saying this, Abe Masahiro staggered and left the Mississippi tremblingly. You are trafficking in people. This goes against the spirit of the United States. After Abe Masahiro left, Perry was very dissatisfied with Liang Zhao's remarks about openly engaging in human trafficking. Perry was born in Rhode Island in the Northeast, a legitimate free state. He himself was also a staunch anti-slavery person. Perry could not accept Liang Zhao's approach. May I ask General Perry, what spirit of America have I violated? Liang Zhao asked back. Colonel Liang, I have to remind you that California is a free state. Anyone who wants to turn California into a slave state will become the public enemy of all the American people, Perry warned. General Perry, I have to remind you that America is not only America in the North, Liang Zhao said seriously. When did I say that I wanted to turn California into a slave state? California's population structure is unbalanced, and the ratio of men to women is very different. If this continues for a long time, California will inevitably become more and more chaotic. I am doing this for the future of California and the West of America. California needs women, and the development of the West of America also needs women. Liang Zhao took a sip of the tea on the table and said slowly, these Japanese women who enter California and America will find their home as free immigrants. They will leave the authoritarian Japan and enter the free America. For them, it is like entering heaven from hell. I am doing a good deed. If you want to say what problem in California is the most troubling to Liang Zhao, it is undoubtedly the population structure. It is obviously impossible to change California's unreasonable population structure in a short period of time by natural and conventional means. Liang Zhao can only take some special measures. Liang Zhao himself does not engage in human trafficking, but Stanford engages in some human trafficking in Central America at his instruction. It's just like when Europeans first started to capture black slaves in Africa. The effect of catching them personally is not good. History has proved that letting local people do these dirty and tiring work can often achieve unexpected results at the lowest cost. Chapter 289 The Anxious Dutchman. The United States forced the Tokugawa shogunate to sign a treaty. Not only were the Japanese anxious, but the Dutch and Japan were even more anxious than the Japanese. When the news of the American army's attack on Nagasaki reached Edo, the Tokugawa shogunate summoned the Dutch several times and consulted the Dutch about America. This is also an unwritten practice of the shogunate. The shogunate had several foreign disputes before. In addition to the United States, there were also many disputes between England and Russia, Tsarist Russia, and the Japanese shogunate. The Tokugawa shogunate finally resolved these problems through the Dutch. Because the shogunate's top brass believed that the Netherlands was a first-class power on the European continent, they believed that the Dutch could resolve all disputes involving Westerners. It's just that now, the stereotype that the Dutch are a first-class power on the European continent has been completely broken as the United States opened the door to Japan. General, please forgive me for offending you. If you sign this treaty, Japan will lose its bright future. Tin, the Dutch representative in Edo, came to Oku in a hurry to meet Tokugawa Ieyasu, but Tokugawa Ieyasu's condition was getting worse and worse, so he could only meet Tin on his sickbed. General, you don't know that America is not in the center of European civilization. Although you also think that America is a Western country, America is the Ezo, Hokkaido. Hokkaido was very underdeveloped before the Meiji Restoration, and it was a wild land in the eyes of the Japanese, among our Western countries. Compared with the British, Americans are more greedy for money, and compared with the Russians, Americans' ambition for territory is even greater. Signing the so-called Japan-US Amity Treaty will cause endless troubles to Japan. With the weakening of the Netherlands' influence in the world has gradually declined. Due to special historical reasons, Japan is one of the few places where the Netherlands has a relatively large influence. For a long time, the Netherlands has been monopolizing Japan's foreign trade. Except for goods from a few places such as the Qing dynasty and Korea, all other foreign goods that want to enter Japan must enter Japan through the hands of the Dutch. Similarly, Japanese exports are also handled by the Dutch. The Dutch, as a middleman, can be said to have made a lot of money in Japan's foreign trade. Once Japan opens its country, the Dutch's monopoly on Japanese trade will seriously damage their economic interests, and they can no longer continue to be the only middleman designated by the Japanese government as before. Therefore, the Dutch and Japan are opposed to Japan's opening of the country, and they hope to maintain the status quo. Do you think Japan has any better choice? Tokugawa Ieyasu, who was as disappointed as death, said expressionlessly. Abe Masahiro had relayed Liang Zhao's words to him, and these words hit Tokugawa Ieyasu's vital points. The increasingly powerful southwestern feudal lords have always been a major concern for Tokugawa Ieyasu. If America really cooperates with the southwestern feudal lords, such an outcome will be worse than signing a treaty. Although Tokugawa Ieyasu was skeptical about Liang Zhao's claim that the United States had thousands of steamships and millions of soldiers, he still did not dare to take Liang Zhao's words lightly. From Nagasaki to Kanagawa, and from Kanagawa to Edo, the American army has proved their terrifying combat power. Even if the United States only sent 100 steamships and 100,000 soldiers to Japan, it would be enough to destroy Japan. Tokugawa Ieyasu had already made up his mind whether to sign the treaty or not. Mediation. We, the Netherlands, and your country have a deep friendship. We are willing to mediate for your country together with England. What America fears is England. As long as the British are willing to mediate with us, the American army can only withdraw from Japan in disgrace, Tin said. I appreciate your kindness. Whether to sign the treaty or not is our internal affairs in Japan. This general has his own decision. Please go back. Tokugawa Ieyasu coldly ordered Tin to leave. Since the Dutch needed to go through the English to mediate, he might as well go to the English himself. Why bother? The English? What's the difference between the English who sold opium in Qing and opened the door of Qing by force and the Americans outside Edo Castle? England and America are just birds of a feather. After Tin left, Tokugawa Ieyasu struggled to get up from his sickbed and said to the shogunate officials and confidants around him, don't forget the shame of today. The star-spangled banner greeted the colorful clouds, and the American soldiers galloped on horses. On this sunny day, Liang Zhao and Perry entered Edo Castle in the cool autumn breeze. Following Liang Zhao was the military band of the California Infantry Regiment, which strode forward playing the passionate march of the volunteers. Following behind Perry was the military band of the American East India Fleet. Perry's military band played cheerful Yankee songs, hummed Yankee tunes, and had a happy smile on their faces. But compared with the Army, the Navy's formation seemed less neat and a little scattered. On both sides of the road were the wooden and terrified Edo people, who knelt on the ground to welcome the American army into Edo City. The elite shogunate soldiers responsible for maintaining order could not kneel down because of their armor, but they still knelt on one knee to welcome the American army into the city. A man has gold under his knees, and the gold under the knees of the Japanese is only worth a mere 100,000 taels of silver. Deng Yan looked around and saw a head that could not be seen at a glance. 100,000 taels of silver is worth buying the dignity of these Japanese, Liang Zhao said with a smile. Looking at these Japanese who knelt on the ground to welcome the king's army, he felt extremely happy and in a very happy mood. The place where the two sides signed the treaty was the castle tower in Oku, which was a symbol of authority in the feudal era of Japan. When the photographer Collins, who was accompanying the army, saw the tall and distinctive castle tower, He excitedly took out his beloved camera from the carriage, carried this bulky guy on his back and chose a favorite camera position, then put his head into the light shielding cover and concentrated on focusing. This camera is too big and too heavy. It would be great if we could make a camera that can be carried with you and can be taken with just a hand. Looking at Collins, who was in a hurry and panting for a photo, Liang Zhao couldn't help but sigh. Collins used a daguerreotype camera, which is the mainstream camera in the world. It was invented by the Frenchman Daguerre. This genius artist and chemist invented the first practical portable camera for mankind, making it possible for mankind to record objective and real pictures. Until the invention of film in 1880, photographers all over the world were using Collins's silver plate photography method. It's a pity that this genius passed away last year. Liang Zhao noticed that the camera Collins used had a bellows for adjusting the focal length, which was a huge improvement over the first camera that came out in 1839. Your ideas are always so bold and avant-garde, but it's a pity that you don't understand cameras. With current technology, this camera is already the most advanced. After completing the exposure, Collins put away his precious camera. "Where is your camera made?" Liang Zhao asked curiously after getting off his horse. "It's made in France. It's not a knockoff made in America. I asked my good friend to buy it from Paris," Collins emphasized. His words were full of contempt for American products, which was understandable. Most American industrial products during this period were almost synonymous with counterfeit and shoddy products. The optical industry is a very practical and promising industry, and Liang Zhao is also interested in getting involved. As long as the optical industry can be built up, whether it is for military or civilian use, there will be a vast market and huge profits. The most important thing is to build up the optical industry as soon as possible so that future generations can benefit from it. After all, the optical industry is an industry that requires long-term technological accumulation and technological precipitation, and it is not something that can be achieved overnight. It is not easy to build a complete optical product industry chain. Take the daguerreotype camera in Collins's hand as an example. To manufacture this camera, the disciplines involved include optics, chemistry, and mechanics. The thresholds for these disciplines are relatively high, and the thresholds for the supporting related industries are even higher. Chapter 290 U.S.-Japan Friendship. "This building is really magnificent," Collins sighed as he looked at the castle tower. "The building of a small family is not magnificent," Liang Zhao said lightly. "Japan is an island country, and Japanese architecture is not magnificent. If you want to talk about grandeur, you have to look at Chinese architecture." Entering the venue for signing the treaty, Perry found that Tokugawa Ieyasu was not present. Perry was very dissatisfied with this. He asked the members of the shogunate present, "Where is General Tokugawa?" In order to ensure the validity of the treaty, Perry hoped that the supreme ruler of the shogunate could sign the treaty in person. This was also Liang Zhao's hope. General Tokugawa is seriously ill and it is inconvenient for him to attend the signing, Abe Masahiro explained to Perry with apology. Abe Masahiro did not lie. Tokugawa Ieyasu's physical condition was getting worse and worse. Now he was in a critical condition, and it was indeed inconvenient for him to attend the signing. However, Tokugawa Ieyasu himself did not want to attend the signing and leave his name on this humiliating treaty. "Since Tokugawa Ieyasu is ill and unable to attend, we will not force him," Liang Zhao said very considerately, "but the treaty must have the signature of the shogun, otherwise we will not be able to explain to our president after we return home. The shogun's signature can be done by the prince." Collins had already prepared the camera. If the shogun of the Tokugawa shogunate did not sign the treaty, Liang Zhao would always feel that something was missing. Moreover, Liang Zhao also needed to take a photo with the supreme ruler of the shogunate so that he could promote it after returning home. The Tokugawa family must attend the signing. Perry's attitude was consistent with Liang Zhao's. The shogunate had no choice but to let the Prince Tokugawa Ieyasu. After Tokugawa Ieyasu's death, Tokugawa Ieyasu changed his name to Tokugawa Ieyasu, attend the signing. Under the gaze of Liang Zhao and Perry, the first elder, Abe Masahiro, signed the treaty tremblingly first, and then the treaty was handed to the expressionless Tokugawa Ieyasu, who slowly signed his name on the treaty without any expression on his face. Collins, who was squatting on the side, hurriedly pressed the shutter of the camera to record this historic moment. After the signing of the Japan-US Amity Treaty, the Nagasaki Treaty was also confirmed by the Tokugawa shogunate and officially came into effect. Naomisin Nabeshima, the lord of the Hizen Saga domain, also regained his freedom. After the signing of the treaty, Liang Zhao, Perry, members of the shogunate, and Tokugawa Ieyasu took photos in the castle tower. May the friendship between the United States and Japan last forever, and the relationship between the two countries be close and friendly. After the photo, Liang Zhao shook hands with Masahiro Abe and said goodbye. Liang Zhao was still satisfied with the results of this expedition to Japan. He had achieved his strategic goal. As for the higher goal of controlling Japan's economic lifeline and turning Japan into a pro-American puppet government, the time has not yet come. After all, the road must be taken step by step, and it is easy to pull the egg if the step is too big. The huge indemnity of 14.9 million taels of silver has been able to suffocate the Tokugawa shogunate for quite a long time. The casualty statistics of the Battle of Kanagawa have also come out. No one was killed on Liang Zhao's side, and 8 were injured. Of course, the so-called no one was killed in the battle, but there were still 2 soldiers who died of diseases due to acclimatization. 3 soldiers on the Navy side were killed, and 7 were injured by the explosion of the ship's gun. Such minor casualties were within the acceptable range for Liang Zhao and Perry. The number of shogunate troops annihilated by them in Kanagawa was as high as 3,400, and 1,500 were captured. As for the wounded, there was no way to count them. The 20,000 elite shogunate troops were destroyed, which was a great loss to the Tokugawa shogunate. The treaty has been signed, and it's time for us to return to America. After leaving the castle tower, Perry said to Liang Zhao, "General Perry will go back first. I have some business in Southeast Asia and Australia, so I will go and see it. I will not return to America with General Perry," Liang Zhao said. "Your business has expanded to Australia?" Perry was very surprised. Liang Zhao did not publicize his umbrella company's gold rush in Australia, so people outside California knew little about the company. "Yes, but I don't know what the prospects are, so I'm going to Australia to take a look," Liang Zhao said. After boarding the Roland, Hu Jinshin handed Liang Zhao 3 letters. The 3 letters were from Fremont, 1 from the engineering team of the California Railway Company, and the remaining 1 from Gadsden, the American minister to Mexico. These 3 letters did not bring good news. Fremont told Liang Zhao in the letter that after more than a year of investigation, he did find a route that was more suitable for building the Pacific Railway. It's just that the terrain where this railway passes is rugged and complex, and many sections are very steep. With the current level of technology, the construction of the railway is very difficult and the risk of failure is very high. Fremont is full of worries about the prospects of this railway. Fremont's attitude was within Liang Zhao's expectations. If the Pacific Railway was easy to build, it would not be called an industrial miracle after it was completed. Not only was Fremont pessimistic about the construction of the Pacific Railway, but professionals in the industry, namely the railway engineering team of the California Railway Company, were also not optimistic about the Pacific Railway. Gadsden's letter told Liang Zhao that he had contacted Mexico several times to discuss the purchase of land, but Mexico asked for a sky-high price, and the amount of land purchase required was far beyond their expectations. There has been no substantial progress in the current position. After reading the letter, Liang Zhao put away the letter and asked Hu Jinshin to call Deng Yan. "Second uncle, according to the Nagasaki Treaty, we have the right to station troops in Nagasaki. We also need a garrison in Japan to protect our rights and interests. I want to let you command the garrison in Nagasaki," Liang Zhao said to Deng Yan. "After returning to the United States, I will apply to the President for the title of the Supreme Commander of the U.S. Army in Japan for you." With the stinginess of the federal government, Liang Zhao did not expect the federal government to send troops to Nagasaki. Besides, Nagasaki was taken down by him, and Liang Zhao had no reason to let other army generals take advantage of it. "What's the point of having a title? I'll follow your arrangement. Besides, Nagasaki is closer to Xiangshan, so it's more convenient to go back to Xiangshan when I want to," Deng Yan said. "By the way, my old brothers from the Navy in Guangdong also want to work for you. As long as they can meet the requirements of Global Shipping Company, I will let Sven find a job for them in Global Shipping Company," Liang Zhao said. "Okay," Deng Yan rubbed his hands and said. "Our California shipyard has a new ship. I'll have someone transfer a ship to you later," Liang Zhao said. The California shipyard has already manufactured an 800-ton dark steamer, but Liang Zhao has not seen it with his own eyes, so he has no way of knowing its specific performance. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, It means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 291, Managing Nagasaki. Please accept me as your disciple. I am willing to follow you and serve you. The Battle of Kanagawa further strengthened Yasuda Shoin's determination to learn from America. No matter how miraculous the Battle of Nagasaki was, Yasuda Shoin only heard about the battle in Nagasaki. But in the Battle of Kanagawa, Yasuda Shoin witnessed with his own eyes that the shogunate army, which was several times larger than the American army, was defeated by the powerful American army in just one day and was powerless to resist. Yasuda Shoin, who was proficient in Chinese studies and Dutch studies, was keenly aware that neither Chinese studies nor Dutch studies could save Japan. Japan urgently needed an object as powerful as the prosperous Tang dynasty and worthy of learning. This is the only way to save Japan. I heard that your former lord, Mori Takashika, appreciated you very much and treated you well, but you still left the domain and became a Ronin. I dare not accept a half-hearted and disloyal person like you, Liang Zhao said as he looked at the thin and short young man in front of him with a determined look in the eyes of the Chushu domain. I left the domain and gave up my samurai status and hereditary salary to become a Ronin with nothing in order to travel around and broaden my horizons. It's not disloyal to my lord. I will always be grateful for the lord's kindness to me. It's just that the Chushu domain is a small place, and what I can learn is really limited, Yasuda Shoin said very seriously. Lu Fengwang once said, what you learn from books is always shallow, and you must practice it to know it. I don't want to be a person who only talks about war on paper. And I don't want to be a frog in a well, but I want to learn something really useful. And these things can only be learned by following you. You have learned Chinese well. Looking at Yasuda Shoin, who is very fluent in Chinese poetry and idioms, Liang Zhao remembered the neat handwriting, rigorous logic, and smooth classical Chinese in the Book of Foreigners, and had to sigh that Yasuda Shoin really has a talent for learning. In terms of age, Yasuda Shoin is about the same age as him, but this is only the physical age. Liang Zhao's psychological age is much older than Yasuda Shoin. It's a pity that such a person can't really be used by him. Liang Sen was born a drifter. He left Japan at a young age for a living. He didn't have a strong sense of identity with Japan, and his family and country feelings were not so strong, so he could be completely used by Liang Zhao. However, Yasuda Shoin, who was deeply influenced by sinology since childhood, had the idea of loyalty to the emperor and the country deeply engraved in his bones. It was obviously unrealistic to expect Yasuda Shoin to work hard for him. It's a pity that sinology has been declining. Sinology in the past could cultivate oneself, manage the family, govern the country and bring peace to the world. Now sinology can cultivate oneself and manage the family, but it is difficult to rely on sinology to govern the country and bring peace to the world, Yasuda Shoin said. I have always loved talents in my life. Since you are a studious person, I will help you. Lieutenant Colonel Deng is a famous American general. He will be stationed in Nagasaki in the future. He just needs an advisor who is familiar with the national conditions of Japan. You can be Colonel Deng's advisor for the time being. Liang Zhao said to Yasuda Shoin. Deng Yan on the side couldn't help but widen his eyes and secretly complained in his heart, when did I become a famous American general? To be honest, the military records of American officers before the Civil War were not very good. There were not many real professional officers. There were more officers like Liang Zhao who came from powerful families in various states, and officers like Perry who came from military families. There were very few middle and senior officers who really climbed up by military records and military merits. Although Deng Yan's current record is not the best among American officers, it is definitely outstanding. It is not an exaggeration to say that he is a famous American general. The record of defeating the Mason Infantry Regiment in the Civil War and the record of defeating the shogunate army in Japan are more valuable than those American officers who relied on the scalps of Indians and bullied their Mexican brothers to get promoted. Thank you, sir. Yasuda Shoin was overjoyed. He loved military science, and being able to be an advisor to senior American officers was also an opportunity for him to get in touch with and learn about American military affairs. After the signing of the Treaty of Nagasaki and the Treaty of Amity between the United States and Japan, Perry did not stay in Japan for long, but left Japan quickly with the treaties and returned directly to the United States. Liang Zhao was not in a hurry to leave, but stayed in Nagasaki for some time. According to Article 3 of the Treaty of Nagasaki, the United States obtained a concession in Nagasaki. Liang Zhao used this concession as a transit station, so at the beginning of the demarcation of the concession, Liang Zhao deliberately demarcated the concession next to the dock to save the cost of subsequent construction. After inspecting Nagasaki and the Nagasaki concession, Liang Zhao made a planning plan for the concession area, and then inspected the Wame Fort. According to Article 2 of the Treaty of Nagasaki, the Wame Fort in Nagasaki was completely taken over by the U.S. military. After Liang Zhao knew himself, the great powers such as Britain, France, and Russia would flock to propose a series of unequal treaties to the Japanese shogunate. In view of the fact that the United States is not strong among the great powers at present, Liang Zhao cannot stop this trend. It is unrealistic for the United States to eat the cake of Japan alone. What Liang Zhao can do is to focus on operating a stronghold, establish the strong position of the United States in the stronghold, and consolidate the benefits that have been obtained. Nagasaki has an advantageous geographical location. It was the only trading port before Japan was founded. It has a relatively open atmosphere and a developed economy. It is a region worthy of key management and a very suitable stronghold. Whoever controls the Wame Fortress controls Nagasaki. This is why Liang Zhao originally asked for the Wame Fortress in Nagasaki. It must be said that Nobeshima Naomis's vision is not bad. There is no problem with the location of the fortress. The biggest problem is the artillery. The outdated artillery on the Wame Fortress is not enough to completely control the waterway into Nagasaki due to its insufficient range and limited firepower coverage. Therefore, it is urgent to assume that new coastal defense artillery is imminent on the basis of the existing artillery. With the current level of artillery casting in California, we are still unable to produce coastal defense artillery that can meet the needs of completely controlling the Nagasaki waterway. After accompanying Liang Zhao on the inspection, Deng Yan came to a rather frustrating conclusion. I heard that the French have good artillery, and you have a good relationship with the French. Why don't you ask the French to help us tinker with this fortress? It's not that California can't make artillery, but it has little experience in making coastal defense artillery. Liang Zhao also spent money to buy the coastal defense artillery in the Kinmen Strait directly from the French, so it is not surprising that Deng Yan has such an idea. But Nagasaki is not San Francisco after all, and the French will not help for free. If the French asked to share the Wame battery with them at that time, wouldn't it be a bargain for the French? The coastal defense artillery on the Wame battery in Nagasaki must be cannons made by us Americans. Liang Zhao's attitude was very clear. Just because California cannot produce coastal defense artillery that meets the requirements does not mean that the United States cannot produce it. After returning to China, I will go to the East and ask the War Department for help, and by the way, ask the War Department for funds to repair the Wame battery in Nagasaki. Chapter 292, Guangdong Provincial Authorities' Response. The news that the American army had defeated the Japanese shogunate army and forced the Japanese shogunate army to sign the humiliating Nagaki Treaty and U.S.-Japan Treaty of Amity quickly spread from Japan to the Qing dynasty across the water. After learning of this news, the Guangdong authorities first doubted the reliability of this news. It was not until Perry's American East India Fleet was replenishing in Xiangshan that Su Guangjin sent someone to confirm the authenticity of this news with Perry. When he learned that the news was true, Su Guangjin's body was refreshed, and at the same time he was glad that he did not have an armed conflict with Liang Zhao in Xiangshan. Even Pan Zhangwei, Pan Shichen, Wu Yuanhu and others who had just returned to Guangzhou were very surprised. Pan Zhangwei and Wu Yuanhu were relatively familiar with the American army, especially the American army in California. There is no doubt that Pan Zhangwei and Wu Yuanhu both believed that the American army had the strength to defeat the Japanese shogunate army. But they didn't expect that Liang Zhao and Perry could defeat the army of the Tokugawa shogunate so quickly and force the Tokugawa shogunate to sign such a harsh and unequal treaty. The Universal Chronicle says that the strongest country in the West is England, followed by France. Among the Western countries, the United States can only be regarded as a second-rate country in terms of strength. I didn't expect that a second-rate Western country could defeat the Japanese shogunate so easily, Pan Shichen, who was familiar with the Universal Chronicle, said with worry. Wikoku is not a weak country. Its people are quite fierce, but it still ended up like this. If one day a first-class Western power like England and France goes to war with my Qing dynasty, how should we respond? Pan Shichen didn't want to experience another opium war. After the end of the First Opium War, the Pan family inevitably became weak and suffered a great loss of financial resources. If he hadn't been decisive and sent Pan Zhangwei to California, the United States to pan for gold, the situation of the Pan family would definitely be more difficult than it is now. I heard that the English are quite dissatisfied with the Jiangning Treaty and have repeatedly asked for a revision of the treaty. If this continues, given the insatiable nature of the English, it is not impossible that the imperial court and England will fight again. Pan Zhangwei did not think that Pan Shichen was exaggerating. There was indeed such a possibility. Vice Admiral Kang Ens, who returned to Guangdong on Perry's favorable ship, immediately reported to Guangdong Navy Admiral Hong Mingxiang what he saw and heard in Japan with the American fleet. The Japanese soldiers are very brave, but in front of guns and cannons, bravery is useless. Colonel Liang fought very easily in the two battles in Nagasaki and Kanagawa, especially the Battle of Kanagawa. Colonel Liang fought against tens of thousands of Japanese shogunate soldiers with only 2,000 troops and defeated the shogunate army in less than a day, Kang En said to Hong Mingxiang with a serious look. Foreign guns and cannons are indeed powerful. Whether in terms of range, firing rate or accuracy, they are much better than our guns and cannons. General Hong, I think that if we want to defend the Guangdong Sea border, we must have foreign guns and cannons. Before leaving, I asked Colonel Liang. And Colonel Liang said that he has an arsenal in California, USA, and can produce guns and cannons by himself. If we need them, we can buy guns and cannons from him. As the commander of the Guangdong Navy, Kang Ens knew very well what the Guangdong Navy was like at the moment. If England invaded Guangzhou again, Kang Ens thought that the performance of the Guangdong Navy might not be better than this time when the Japanese pirates resisted the United States. I heard that the American army suffered only a few casualties in this campaign, but is it true? Hong Mingxiang asked about the casualties of the American army. Hong Mingxiang knew the advantages of foreign guns and cannons, and of course he wanted them, but there were still two problems before them. The first problem was the problem of money. The Guangdong Navy could hardly pay the military salaries, let alone buy guns and cannons. The second question was the question of the court's permission. If the court investigated the purchase of a large number of foreign guns and cannons without the court's permission, he, as the admiral of the Guangdong Navy, could not bear the responsibility. It's true, Kang Ens gave a very affirmative answer. The total number of casualties of the two American navies was only a dozen people. I saw it with my own eyes. You compile your experience of this matter into text, and follow me to the minister to explain the pros and cons. Hong Mingxiang sighed and said. I have compiled this experience into text. As he said, Kang Ens brought a wooden box, and inside the wooden box was the manuscript of his records of East Japan. Hong Mingxiang opened the wooden box, took out a few pages and read them roughly, and nodded with satisfaction. You did a good job this time. A few days later, at the Human Fort, Hong Mingxiang invited Su Guangjin to the Human Fort to review the Human soldiers. Human is the key to Guangzhou, and the soldiers on the Human Fort are naturally the elite of the Qing army. It was just different from the past. In the past, when the superiors wanted to review the troops, they would at least let them know in advance so that they could prepare in advance. But this time, the Qing soldiers at Human Fort saw two first-rank officials appear at Human Fort without receiving any notice, which made the Qing soldiers at Human Fort panic. Human Fort is not a single fort, but a fortress group composed of more than a dozen large and small forts, including Shaijiao Fort, Daijiao Fort, Shanghangdangdao Fort, Weiyun Fort, Jinggyuan Fort, Xianan 3 forts, Hangdang Fort, and Yong'an Fort, with 3 layers in front and back. It is the most complete fort in the Qing dynasty's sea border. If it is properly managed, it can indeed play the role of shielding Guangzhou. Hong Mingxiang and Su Guangjin first inspected the outermost Shaijiao Fort. Although there was no situation of drying clothes with gun barrels on Shaijiao Fort, the absence of soldiers on duty and improper storage of ammunition have indeed become the norm. According to the organization, Shaijiao Fort should have a green camp, with a total of 1,100 soldiers stationed there. At this time, there were only about 400 Qing soldiers on Shaijiao Fort, and half of them were old smokers who couldn't stand steadily and had runny noses. Seeing this situation, even though Hong Mingxiang and Su Guangjin were mentally prepared, they were still angry and their faces turned blue. Although Human Fort was the most solid and complex coastal defense fortress in the Qing dynasty, it was old news that soldiers were always short of soldiers and could not be fully staffed. In theory, that is, under full staffing, the entire Human Fort group should have more than 11,000 Green Camp soldiers stationed there. In fact, the number of soldiers stationed at Human Fort has never reached this number. Even during Liang Zhao's rectification of Human's military preparations, the number of soldiers stationed at Human Fort that could actually be put into combat was only 7,000 to 8,000. When Guan Xianpai went to the front line in person after the Shaijiao and Daijiao forts outside Human fell, he had no choice. If the front-line soldiers were strong, why would the commander risk his life to go to the front line? Liu Fang, the captain of Shaijiao battalion. Do you admit your guilt? Hong Mingxiang asked in a deep voice. I admit my guilt. Liu Fang was still in a daze. He was a little drunk from smoking, and walked unsteadily to Hong Mingxiang with his Lingbo Weibu. Then he knelt on the ground, sniffing two clear snots from his nose. Chapter 293 Guangdong Coastal Defense. How many soldiers should Shaijiao Fort have? How many soldiers are there in Shaijiao Fort now? Hong Mingxiang asked Liu Fang in a deep voice. Hong Mingxiang was not unaware of the situation of the Guangdong Navy, but before that, Hong Mingxiang, like most Qing dynasty officials, had a mentality of muddling through. Liang Yao's visit and Japan's rapid defeat sounded the alarm for Hong Mingxiang. Hong Mingxiang felt that Guangdong province, which was on the front line of coastal defense, could not continue to be so corrupt. In fact, thanks to Liang Zhao's rectification of Guangdong's coastal defense 12 years ago, Human Fort was already the best coastal defense fort in the entire Qing dynasty. The south is an important place for coastal defense. The three major navies of the Qing dynasty, the Guangdong Navy, the Fujian Navy, and the Yangtze River Navy, are all located in the south. Among these three navies, the Guangdong Navy is also the best one, followed by the Fujian Navy, and the most corrupt is the Yangtze River Navy. Even the best Guangdong Navy is in a very worrying situation. Shaijiao Fort, there should be more than 1,000 soldiers, but there are more than 600 soldiers on duty, and many brothers have asked for leave. After being asked by Hong Mingxiang, Liu Fang was also frightened and woke up, shaking like a sieve. You are talking nonsense. Open your dog eyes and look. There are 600 people in Shaijiao Fort. Liu Fang, I think your job as a captain has ended. Liu Fang's answer made Hong Mingxiang furious. As the captain of Shaijiao battalion, Liu Fang couldn't even answer how many soldiers he had, and he lied with his eyes open. Shaijiao Fort is under the charge of Shaijiao battalion. There are a total of 1,132 soldiers of various types on the register, and 421 soldiers have actually arrived. At this time, a captain who was kneeling beside him answered. Finally, someone knows the number, Hong Mingxiang said to the captain. Stand up and speak. What's your name and what's your position? General Hong, I'm Chen Hai, currently serving as the deputy commander of Shaijiao Fort, the commander replied. I've always heard that the Green Camp Navy of Guangdong province is corrupt, but I didn't expect it to be so corrupt. Su Guangjin was also shocked by the current situation on Shaijiao Fort. Sir, these are just people. The situation of the cannons is also very worrying. I went to General Pen to ask for a tribute cannon from the United States. Compared with the tribute cannons from the United States, the cannons on Human Fort can't be called cannons at all, but scraps of copper and iron. Immediately, Hong Mingxiang asked again. How many cannons are there on Shaijiao Fort, and how many of these cannons are usable? Faced with Hong Mingxiang's simple question, Liu Fang was not surprised to answer. General Hong, there are a total of 37 new-style cannons on the Shaijiao Fort that were cast in the 15th year of Dao Guang, 1835. General Guan asked the French in Macau to supervise their manufacture. However, these cannons are not well maintained, and only 26 of them are still usable, Chen Hai replied. Test the cannons. Hong Mingxiang gave the order to test the cannons in a cold voice. When they heard that they were going to test fire the cannons, the faces of these artillerymen were all terrified. General Hong, there are many merchant ships outside the Pearl River estuary. If you test the cannons rashly, I am afraid that the merchant ships passing by may be damaged, Liu Fang said. If you can hit the merchant ships passing by, I will reward you with 50 taels of silver. Hong Mingxiang's face became uglier and uglier. Seeing Hong Mingxiang's firm attitude, the Qing soldiers on the Shaijiao Fort could only bite the bullet and test the cannons in a hurry. As Chen Hai said, 11 of the 37 cannons could not fire. Less than 3 rounds of test firing, One cannon exploded directly, and 2 cannons cracked to varying degrees. As for the accuracy and range, it was even more unsatisfactory. The Qing army's artillery had been of poor quality due to material and process problems for a long time. Although Lin Zexu and Guan Xianpi asked the Portuguese in Macau to help cast new cannons for these cannons on the Human fort, the so-called new ones were only relative to the cannons used by the Qing army itself, and the iron used to cast the cannons was hard and brittle white cast iron, which was easy to explode. The method of casting cannons also adopted the outdated mud film process. This cannon casting process is prone to uneven heating and impurities when the molten iron is poured. Therefore, it is inevitable to reduce the quality of the cannon and increase the risk of bursting. During the Opium War, these coastal defense guns on the Human fort and the British warships fired at each other, and they were not surprisingly at a disadvantage. At that time, the British naval guns were all front-loading smoothbore guns, but the British naval guns were made of green iron with good toughness and cast by wax casting. The quality of the guns was much better than that of the Qing army. In addition, the British Army had a rich variety of ammunition, and the British Empire Royal Navy's ancestral gunpowder ratio was added. The gunners were all experienced gunners. It was expected that the British warships could suppress the Qing army on the Human fort. This was only 12 years ago. After 12 years of development, the gap between the Qing army and the British army has widened. Hong Mingxiang's 2 soldiers pulled up the 2-inch small guns from Pan's Hengwei. This small gun was said to be a tribute, but in fact it was a naval gun tailored by Liang Zhao for the Loach class. The gun adopts a rear-loading rifle design, and the gun is not cast as a whole. The inner barrel of the gun is made of steel, wrapped in wrought iron, and uses a vertical airtight structure. In front of those stupid, big, black and rough muzzle-loading guns on the Shaijiao fort, this 2-inch small gun looks a bit small and thin. However, the workmanship is indeed better than those old guns on the Shaijiao fort, and the gun body is very smooth and neat, which is very comfortable to look at. In contrast, the guns on the Human fort are crude and full of potholes, and even the inner wall of the barrel is potholes. Hong Mingxiang personally picked up a shell and stuffed it into the barrel on the Shaijiao fort. I saw that there was a gap of nearly half an inch between the shell and the barrel, and it was completely impossible to fit. Such a gun, such a shell, can only be shot accurately. Afterwards, Hong Mingxiang personally tested the 2-inch small gun. Within 3 miles, this powerful little gun can be said to be able to hit wherever it is pointed. The range is not even inferior to those old coastal defense guns on the Shaijiao fort, and the firing rate is even more amazing. Westerners' guns are really good. Su Guangjin on the side also had to admit this. He himself also favored this cannon. Northern Guangdong and Guangxi are mountainous, and the bandits that Su Guangjin wanted to suppress are mostly in these mountainous areas. If he could get a few guns and take them into the mountains to suppress the bandits, it would be a good choice. My lord, I beg you to rectify the Guangdong Navy, cut redundant soldiers, and purchase Western guns and cannons to strengthen Guangdong's coastal defense, Hong Mingxiang said to Su Guangjin in an earnest tone. Su Guangjin looked at the ships from various countries coming and going at the mouth of the Pearl River, his face full of helplessness. As the governor of Guangdong and Guangxi, how could Su Guangjin not know about the accumulated problems of the Green Camp Navy in Guangdong province? However, there are some things that Su Guangjin is powerless to change even if he knows them. If the Qing dynasty had abundant financial resources more than a decade ago, it might be possible to rectify the Guangdong Navy, cut redundant soldiers, and purchase new firearms. As for now, it is good enough to maintain the status quo, so how can we dare to hope to promote benefits and eliminate disadvantages? Shangshan, you are also an old man in the Guangdong Navy, how can you say such childish words? It's easy for you to say cutting down redundant soldiers and purchasing Western guns and cannons, but no matter which one you do, you will have to spend money, a lot of money. The Guangdong and Guangxi regions cannot afford the money you want, and the court will not allocate it either. As for cutting down redundant soldiers, don't you think it's not chaotic enough now? The rebel Taiping rebels and the refugees everywhere are enough to give this governor a headache. Have you ever thought about what the consequences will be after these redundant soldiers lose their livelihoods? It's my fault for not considering it. Hong Mingxiang was very disappointed with Su Guangjin's remarks, but he had to admit that this was the current situation in Guangdong, and it could also be said that this was the situation in the entire Qing dynasty. It was not easy for Su Guangjin to maintain the situation in the Guangdong and Guangxi regions, but Hong Mingxiang was still unwilling to accept it. It's not that I don't sympathize with your difficulties, but the English are very rampant in Guangdong. The Guangdong gentry have suffered from the English for a long time, and the people of Guangdong can still use their hearts. If you can raise some money to strengthen the defense of several artillery forts outside Human to deter the British, it will be better than doing nothing. I don't want to be the next Guan Junman. It's good that you have this intention. I support strengthening the coastal defense of Guangdong province. If you have any ideas, go ahead and do it. As long as you don't make a big mess, I will cover it for you. Su Guangjin was stunned at first, and after pondering for a long time, he slowly said, "Thank you, Mr. Minister." After hearing Su Guangjin's statement, Hong Mingxiang was overjoyed. He didn't have much hope that Su Guangjin would give him actual support. Su Guangjin's statement was enough. Hong Mingxiang walked up to Liu Fang, who was kneeling with them legs, and said, "Liu Fang, you have neglected your duties. From now on, you are no longer the captain of Sheijiao camp. Chen Hai will take over the position." Liang Zhao returned to Xiangshan in mid-December 1852. The winter in Xiangshan was slightly warmer than Nagasaki. The accompanying officers and soldiers were stationed in Ding, Xiangshan, as usual. But this time, Liang Zhao was not stopped by the Guangdong authorities like last time. I guess the Guangdong authorities also knew that they couldn't stop him even if they wanted to. Moreover, Liang Zhao did not cause trouble to the officials of Guangdong and Xiangshan last time. The Guangdong authorities also turned a blind eye to Liang Zhao's leading troops to Xiangshan, pretending not to see it. Seeing the return of the American soldiers carrying the Star-Spangled Banner, the local residents of Xiangshan were the happiest. After all, these soldiers not only do not disturb the people, but are also famous for being happy to pay for things. The last time these American soldiers left Xiangshan, the local residents were reluctant to let them go. With the return of these American soldiers, a lively market soon formed around the Xiangshan camp. When the merchants in Guangzhou heard that Liang Zhao had returned to Xiangshan, they also rushed from Guangzhou city to the Xiangshan camp to welcome Liang Zhao. This is the current general merchant of the 13 Hongs, and the helmsman of our Tongfuhang, Pan Shichen. Pan Zhengwei introduced Pan Shichen to Liang Zhao. "General Merchant Pan, I have heard of him for a long time. I have heard that General Merchant Pan is a big celebrity in front of the emperor and is favored by the emperor." Liang Zhao greeted him with a smile. "What kind of big celebrity is he? If Prince Gong hadn't come forward to say a few words for us this time, I am afraid that our heads would have been explained in Keishikao," Pan Shichen said self-deprecatingly. "I think it was Brother Tingayu or Brother Liangai who said something that shouldn't have been said, which made His Majesty unhappy," Liang Zhao guessed randomly. Pan Shichen has been immersed in the officialdom of the business world for so many years that he would not make such a low-level mistake as saying something that shouldn't be said. The problem can only be with Pan Zhengwei and Wu Yuanhe. The two have been in California for a long time and are used to the Californian atmosphere. It is also a matter of cleaning up that they have not adapted to the Qing dynasty for a while. The emperor is still very interested in foreign things, but some ministers don't like foreign things. Pan Zhengwei smiled bitterly and said, "Brother Liang, I lost a bet between us. Those things in California have no place in the Qing dynasty. Please sit down." Liang Zhao motioned everyone to sit down, and then continued. "You can't say that. These things will naturally have no use in the capital, but they may have a place in Guangdong. The Hong army is very interested in the guns and cannons equipped by my army. You have a deep foundation in Guangdong. Guangdong is far away from the emperor. If you set up a factory in Guangdong, as long as you manage it properly and don't make too much noise, the emperor can't control our Guangdong, which is far away from the emperor." Liang Zhao pointed out a clear way for them. As for whether they dare to do it, it depends on whether these Guangzhou merchants have the courage. Liang Zhao's Xiangshan shipyard also needs some industrial supporting facilities. Moreover, most of the coal stored in his warehouse in Xiangshan is bought from Hong Kong. Liang Zhao doesn't want to be strangled by the British in terms of coal. It would be great if Guangzhou merchants could open a few coal plants in Guangdong to refine coal. Even if the quality of coal is much worse than that of the British, Liang Zhao can accept it. Speaking of General Hong came to me a few days ago and said that he wanted to buy some foreign guns and cannons to strengthen Guangdong's coastal defense and guard against the British. He hoped that our Wu family could donate some silver, Wu Shengrong said. If General Hong buys ships and guns from me, Liang is willing to make concessions and sell them to General Hong at a lower price for the sake of our compatriots and fellow townsmen, Liang Zhao said. If Guangdong's sea borders are stable, it will be good for me and all of you. If the British invade Guangdong again and force the Qin dynasty to cede territory and pay compensation, the compensation will eventually be shared by all of you. Instead of paying these silver coins to the British, it is better to donate some to General Hong to buy guns and cannons. Liang Zhao's words were not alarmist. During the two opium wars, Guangzhou merchants borne a large number of compensations in the form of donations. Arms have always been a very profitable business, and the profits are no less than opium. Liang Zhao also wanted to open up the arms foreign trade market. The arms currently produced in California were naturally not favored by countries with strong industrial strength, such as Britain, France and Germany. The Qin dynasty was a good choice. If the Qin dynasty's arms market could be opened before the westernization movement and a good reputation could be established, it would be easier to seize the arms orders of the Qin dynasty in the future. Chapter 294 Group Training. Liang Zhao received these local Guangzhou merchants at Xiangshan camp. The Wu family and the Pan family, who were the first to arrive in California, both reaped the benefits of the California gold rush, and their financial conditions gradually improved. In addition to the gradually improving financial situation, the two families also had another way to choose, and they did not have to tie the entire family to the dead tree of the Qin dynasty. Although the Guangzhou merchants who arrived later did not eat meat, they at least got a share. The timid and cautious merchants who were still waiting and did not enter the venue became more and more restless. During the banquet, many Guangzhou merchants, even those who came from Guangxi, consulted Liang Zhao about California. Liang Zhao naturally welcomed these potential high-quality immigrants with wealth. Although he had been running California for 3 years, and California also had the most basic industry, in general, California was still in its infancy. What was most lacking in the infancy was talent and capital, and what was least lacking was opportunities. Liang Zhao noticed that Pan Zhanghui, Wu Yuanhe and others still looked worried. It was probably the contrast between the Qin dynasty and the United States that put them in deep conflict. On the one hand, many of them had already become American citizens, but on the other hand, they were deeply attached to their homeland and could not let go of their concerns for their homeland. They hoped to do something within their power to change the status quo of their homeland. After the banquet, Liang Zhao walked out of the warm military tent, blowing the damp and cold wind of December in Lingnan. The winter in Xiangshan in the mid-19th century gave him the most intuitive feeling that it was just like the world, very cold, at least much colder than the winter in Xiangshan in the early 21st century. Pan Zhanghui knocked a long pipe with a pipe hanging in his hand against the stone twice, then stuffed a ball of tobacco leaves into it and pressed it tightly, took out a box of safety matches from his sleeves, and struck 3 or 4 matches before successfully lighting the tobacco leaves. After the tobacco leaves were lit, Pan Zhanghui took several puffs to make his head clearer. What you said to me at the beginning of the year was true. You can never wake up a person who is pretending to sleep. I really regret not listening to you. I almost lost my head in the capital. The trip to the capital made Pan Zhanghui completely lose hope in this zombie-like court. The Manchu nobles are pretending to sleep. Not all Chinese people are pretending to sleep. Ting Yu is not pretending to sleep. Liang Zhao looked up at the deep starry sky. Since those who are pretending to sleep don't want to wake up, let them sleep forever. The dark night is dotted with countless bright stars. This is the clear and pure starry sky of the agricultural era. In downtown San Francisco, California, it was difficult to see such a clear and clean starry sky when Liang Zhao left San Francisco in the summer. I will discuss with the merchants in Guangzhou to raise some silver for the Huang army to buy arms. Pan Shichen found a secluded place to urinate and came back. Seeing Liang Zhao, Pan Zhanghui, Wu Shengrong and Wu Yuanhe were all there, he walked up and said, Pan Shichen is now the general merchant of the 13 Hongs in Guangzhou, so he still has this ability. The Guangzhou merchants who have already taken root in California have a good relationship with Liang Zhao, and they dare not offend Liang Zhao. They are still willing to pay this little money to buy arms. The Guangzhou merchants who have not taken root in California have also shown a strong interest in California. They are willing to pay some money to promote friendship with Liang Zhao. Pan Shichen also knows that the arms industry in California is controlled by Liang Zhao, and the money they pay will eventually flow into Liang Zhao's pocket. It is better to pay a little money to purchase arms and strengthen Guangdong's coastal defense than to pay a lot of money to the British to redeem the city and bear the levy of the court's compensation after Guangzhou city is broken. Wu Shengrong also agreed to raise some military funds for the Guangdong authorities to strengthen the strength of the Guangzhou garrison. In the 21st year of Emperor Daoguang's reign, 1841, Guangzhou was captured by the British Army. Yishan, the imperial commissioner who succeeded Lin Zexu, was worried that Emperor Daoguang would punish him. In order to take back Guangzhou, he secretly signed an armistice agreement with the British plenipotentiary Elliot. The British agreed to withdraw from Guangzhou on the condition that Yishan paid a ransom of $6 million silver and compensated the British merchants for the loss of 300,000 taels of silver, and the money must be paid within 7 days. If the $6 million silver were not paid within 7 days, an additional $7 million silver would be paid. If the payment was not made within 14 days, an additional $8 million silver would be paid. If the payment was not made within 20 days, an additional $9 million silver would be paid. Yishan naturally could not come up with the money, so he set his sights on the merchants of the 13 Hongs in Guangzhou, who were the moneybags of the court anyway. The merchants of the 13 Hongs in Guangzhou eventually bore 1/3 of the ransom fee, and the Wu family alone paid $1.1 million silver for the ransom. Of course, this was just the beginning. The subsequent indemnity of the Treaty of Nanjing, also known as the Treaty of Nanjing, was also levied on the Guangzhou merchants. The heavy burden of indemnity donations was the most direct reason for the rapid decline of the 13 Hongs in Guangzhou. Ironically, Yishan, the imperial envoy, was not ashamed of redeeming Guangzhou city through such humiliating means. Instead, he reported the victory to the court and claimed credit, saying shamelessly that he had recovered Guangzhou city. This further caused the Qing court to misjudge the form of the war, believing that the advantage was in our hands, and rejected the British request for peace talks. Seeing that the Qing court was unwilling to surrender, the British army continued to march north, plundering the coast of Jiangsu and Zhejiang until it captured Zhenjiang, a key point on the canal. Mr. Liang, do you think the British will provoke trouble again? Wu Yuanhou can be said to have PTSD for the indemnity. Although the Wu family has a rich family background, they can't stand such a toss. After enjoying a rare sense of security in California, Wu Yuanhou is unwilling to be an honest emperor in the South Treasury. No matter how much money there is in the South Treasury, it belongs to the emperor, not himself. That depends on how the British goods sell in the Qing dynasty. Liang Zhao did not directly answer Wu Yuanhou's question. The four looked at each other in silence, and their faces became more and more ugly. They already had the answer in their hearts. The 13 Hongs in Guangzhou also did business with the British East India Company, and many of the British East India Company's goods were handled by them. They knew very well how the British goods sold in the Qing dynasty. In addition to opium, the sales data of other commodities of the British East India Company in China were very bleak. In other words, the British goal of the First Opium War was not achieved, and the performance of the Chinese market was far from meeting the British expectations. The war 12 years ago seemed to be over, but in fact the war between Britain and the Qing dynasty had just begun. With the long-haired bandits rebelling inside and the British eyeing them covetously outside, it is really a troubled time, Pan Shichen sighed. Pan Shichen, who had been dealing with the British since he was a child, knew the British character very well. The British were greedy, hypocritical, and profit-seeking, and they could do such a thing. Pan Shichen believed that Liang Zhao's judgment was correct. As for Wu Yuanhou and Pan Zhangwei, they saw with their own eyes how Liang Zhao established himself in America. They also believed in Liang Zhao's judgment and grasp of the current situation. Why is Mr. Pan worried? There are many things in troubled times, but there are also more opportunities. Liang Zhao retracted his gaze from the starry sky and said to Pan Shichen. Pan Shichen is an outlier among Guangzhou merchants. Compared with other Guangzhou merchants, Pan Shichen has a stronger interest in politics. This is also due to the family style of the Pan family. Although Pan Qi, the founder of the Pan family, was born in the grass, he attached great importance to the education of his children and grandchildren after he became rich. In the second generation, Pan Qi's second son, Pan Yaowei, the second uncle of Pan Zhangwei, was very proud to pass the imperial examination and opened the way for the Pan family to be both an official and a businessman. If the Pan family were asked to choose between being an official and a businessman, they would choose being an official without hesitation. During the period of the second generation of the Pan family, Pan Yaodu, the Pan family wanted to give up business several times, and even closed Tongfuhang, completely abandoning the Pan family's identity as a merchant family and completely integrating into the scholar official group. But the court was unwilling to give up the Pan family's cash cow, so the Pan family had to bite the bullet and continue to run Tongfuhang. Since Pan Shichen was interested in politics, he was not stingy to give Pan Shichen some advice. "Please teach me, Mr. Liang," Pan Shichen bowed to Liang Zhao. "I have heard a little about the Long Hair Rebellion. I heard that this group of rebels is extraordinary and is particularly good at winning people's hearts. There are also many people who are good at using troops under the command of the bandit leader Hong Zikun. At present, the Long Hair Rebellion can be said to be unstoppable in Hunan, and it is said that there are millions of people," Liang Zhao said slowly. "Millions of people may be bluffing. But I think there are still hundreds of thousands of young and strong people," Pan Shichen said. "General Pan, do you think that the court can quell the Long Hair Rebellion relying on the 8 banners and the Green Camp alone?" Liang Zhao asked knowingly. "Ahem, the 8 banners were already useless during the reign of Emperor Kangxi. As for the Green Camp, it was difficult to suppress the White Lotus sect during the reign of Emperor Qianlong. This time, the Taiping Rebellion is much more serious than the White Lotus sect in my opinion. It is difficult to rely on the Green Camp to suppress the Taiping Rebellion." Pan Shichen shook his head and said. "It seems that Pan Shichen is quite insightful." Liang Zhao was satisfied with Pan Shichen's answer. This Pan Shichen deserves his advice. The 8 banners and the Green Camp are useless, and the Taiping Rebellion has to be suppressed. The court has no money now. In the end, the court will definitely allow local militias to be trained, Liang Zhao said to Pan Shichen meaningfully. In fact, in November, Emperor Xianfeng issued an order to allow militias to be trained to prevent Taiping Rebellion, but Guangzhou is far away from the capital, and Emperor Xianfeng's order had not yet reached Guangzhou. "You mean, let me organize militias?" Pan Shichen reacted quickly. "The Qing dynasty has been established for 200 years, and Han officials have never been able to raise their heads in the court, all because they have no military power. The Taiping rebels are in turmoil, and the Green Camp and 8 banners are useless. If the court encourages local militia training, isn't this a great opportunity for Han officials to regain military power?" Liang Zhao persuaded. "General Pan is rich and has strong financial resources, so there is no need to elaborate. There are many refugees in Guangdong and Guangxi, so there is no need to worry about the problem of military resources. The arsenal in California can provide General Pan with guns and even warships. This is a good opportunity given to General Pan by God. Tuanlin has existed since ancient times and can be understood as the ancient Chinese militia. During the reigns of Qianlong and Jiaqing, because the weak 8 banners and Green Camp could not suppress the White Lotus Rebellion, the Qianlong and Jiaqing dynasties used a large number of local militias. However, although the Qing dynasty allowed local militias to assist the 8 banners and Green Camp in combat, there were strict restrictions on the scale of local militias and combat in other places. This is also the reason why, although local militias were organized during the reigns of Emperors Qianlong and Jiaqing, they did not eventually develop into local separatist forces during the reigns of Emperors Qianlong and Jiaqing. This situation was not broken until the emergence of Zheng Yufen's Xiong army. At first, the court was also very defensive against Zheng Yufen's Xiong army. Zheng Yufen was a minister, but he was still an ordinary man. An ordinary man lived in the neighborhood. Once he called, more than 10,000 people would rise up and follow him. I am afraid it is not a blessing for the country. This was the general mentality of the people in power in the capital when the Xiong army first showed its edge. Emperor Xianfeng was of course aware of this, but there was no way. The 8 banners and the Green Camp were really unusable. In order to pacify the Taiping Heavenly Kingdom, Emperor Xianfeng had to use the Xiong army and had to allow the Xiong army to fight in Hunan, so that the Xiong army could become a regular army from local militias. Use it. The Manchu high-level officials always guarded against the Xiong army, and cut off the Xiong army's food and wages every now and then to hit the Xiong army. The food and wages of the Xiong army came from the legion collected by setting up checkpoints, extorting local gentry, looting on the spot, and even massacring the city. The brutality of the Hunan army's massacre made an outstanding contribution to the family planning of the Qing dynasty. There is no specific data on how many people died in the Taiping Rebellion, ranging from 10 million to hundreds of millions. Even if we estimate it very conservatively, the number of people who died directly or indirectly must have reached tens of millions, while the total population of the United States during the same period was only more than 20 million. It is undeniable that a sharp decline in China's population during the Xiantong period was caused by multiple forces such as the Taiping Army, the Hunan Army, the Eight Banners, the Green Camp, local militias, and the Nian Army. However, as the mainstay of the Qing dynasty during the Xiantong period, the Hunan Army had the widest combat range and the most records of massacres, and was definitely the most sinful of these forces. Zheng's shaved head was not in vain. Compared with Zheng Yufan, Sherman, who was known as the Northern Butcher and killed the Southern Confederacy directly, and even the North itself could not stand it, could be regarded as a great man. After listening to Liang Zhao's speech, Pan Shichen was moved, but he was still hesitant and could not make up his mind. The imperial court has strict restrictions on the number of militias and their locations. The Taiping rebels have at least hundreds of thousands of young and strong men. What use can a few hundred or thousands of militias be? Pan Shichen also has his own concerns. At present, the Taiping rebels are sweeping across the southeast, and governors general in various places are trying to avoid them. Everyone is not a fool. They all know that the Eight Banners and Green Camp stationed in various places are useless. No one is willing to be the first to come forward to suppress the Taiping rebels. Of course, Pan Shichen also understands that it is precisely because no one is willing to be the first to come forward that officials like him, who come from a merchant family, have the opportunity to command the army. I don't think so. It's not the quantity of soldiers that matters, but their quality. The troops I sent to Japan were only 2 regiments with more than 2,000 people. We still defeated tens of thousands of elite soldiers of the shogunate and forced the Tokugawa shogunate to sign a treaty in Edo Castle, Liang Zhao said. Besides, if the court is anxious, it may not be unwilling to relax the scale of militia training. Mr. Liang, I heard that the mercenary system is very popular in Western countries. Can we directly hire the California Infantry Regiment for militia training? Pan Zhengwei's eyes lit up and he expressed his idea. The California Infantry Regiment is under the Ministry of the Army. How can we hire it at will? If we hire it out, how can I explain it to the Ministry of the Army? Liang Zhao rejected Pan Zhengwei's proposal. The California Infantry Regiment is his most relied upon unit, and he will never hire it out easily. He needs a strong army to ensure his absolute control over California. Moreover, the issue of Mexico's land purchase is still unresolved, and he also needs an elite force to maintain the border security of California. I didn't think it through. Pan Zhengwei also felt that his proposal was too rash. But I can form a teaching team to help General Pan practice militia. If the militia is successfully practiced, General Pan can be a minister of the Qing dynasty's rejuvenation, or he can rule a region. No matter how the Qing dynasty's history is compiled, General Pan's contribution is indispensable. Liang Zhao continued to fan the flames. Only when you have a strong army, your money is yours. Otherwise, no matter how much money you accumulate, it will be useless. Sooner or later, the court will suck it dry. Liang Zhao could say such treasonous words. Pan Shichen and others were not surprised at all. Liang Zhao had bluntly called Emperor Xianfang the old emperor before. Liang Zhao's words also touched their sore spots. No matter whether it was the Pan family or the Wu family, even if they were the richest in the world, what could they do? They were just the emperor's southern treasury. It was a compliment to say that they were lambs to be slaughtered. Lambs had to be fattened before being killed, but as long as they wanted, they could reach into the money bag at any time and anywhere. This is a serious matter. Let me think about it again. Pan Shichen, who was in a dilemma, started to fight with a rosary in his hand, and his thumb quickly moved the smooth beads. Seeing Pan Shichen's attitude, Liang Zhao knew that Pan Shichen had his own ideas. This world belongs to the Manchus, not the Han people. This world belongs to the Manchu nobles and scholars, not the merchants and common people. Liang Zhao turned around and walked towards his residence, saying treasonous words. Chapter 295 The Liang Family's Way Out. Grandpa is very talented, but in all the generations of our Liang family, there is only one Jinshi like Grandpa. How do the younger generations of the Liang family have a talent for studying compared to Grandpa when he was young? In the Liang family compound in Xiangshan, Liang Zhao asked his grandfather Liang Weiming a soul-searching question. Liang Weiming asked the children of the Liang family to learn foreign languages and go to California to find a job under Liang Zhao. Now some of the children of the Liang family have already arrived in California, and Liang Zhao has arranged jobs for them. But Liang Weiming still can't let go of his obsession with the imperial examination, and hopes to let a few of the more talented children of the Liang family continue to take the path of the imperial examination. The Liang family is a family of scholars, and the path of merchants is not the right way. Liang Weiming's attitude is still quite stubborn. That was in the Qing dynasty. In America, the path of merchants was the most correct path, Liang Zhao said. The Qing dynasty is now experiencing a major change that has not happened in 1,000 years. If Grandpa wants the children of the Liang family to enter politics, the imperial examination is not the only way. There are other ways to go. It was not so easy to pass the imperial examination in the Qing dynasty, and it was not something that could be obtained by just spending money. The Pang family was rich enough. 4 or 5 generations spent so much money, and the family tradition was also very good, but they only produced one imperial scholar. For example, Li Hongzhang passed the imperial examination at the age of 17, the imperial examination at the age of 21, the imperial examination at the age of 24, and became a governor at the age of 39. It was rare to have such a smooth imperial examination career throughout the Qing dynasty. It was a rare minority among the rare few. A down-and-out scholar like Tycoon, who couldn't even pass the imperial examination in his 30s, was a true portrayal of most intellectuals in the Qing dynasty. The difficulty of taking the imperial examination in all dynasties was not to cross a single plank bridge with thousands of troops, but to take the head of a general from 1,000,000 troops. What way? Liang Weiming asked after taking a sip of tea. Tuanlian, Liang Zhao pointed out a shortcut to Liang Weiming. Tuanlian, Liang Weiming was puzzled. Yes, Tuanlian, Liang Zhao said with a very affirmative tone, the court wants to suppress the Taiping rebels, and it is only a matter of time before they release Tuanlian. This is a good opportunity for the Liang family to turn things around. Although Pan Shichen was already tempted to organize Tuanlian, Liang Zhao did not want to bet on Pan Shichen alone. Moreover, Liang Zhao did not want the future Tuanlian to be controlled by the Pan family. At least his family should also get a share of the Tuanlian. The Taiping rebels were able to fight in Guangxi, Guangdong, and Hunan under heavy siege, and threaten the capital of Hunan province. They are definitely not ordinary people. Can Tuanlian alone suppress the Taiping rebels? Liang Weiming said, touching his chin. When Hongzhou just started the rebellion last year, no one in the Qing dynasty from the capital to the local areas thought that this group of bandits could become a big deal. In just less than 2 years, the situation took a sharp turn for the worse. At this time, the ruling class of the Qing dynasty, especially the gentry in the south, had already felt that this group of long-haired bandits was not simple. Although Liang Weiming was idle and lived in Xiangshan, he was not indifferent to the outside world. Ordinary militias can't do anything to the long-haired bandits, but if this militia is a new army with new equipment and Western training, it may be able to fight, Liang Zhao said. When the time comes, as long as our Liang family leads the troops to fight a beautiful battle at the airport, we can show our talents in front of the emperor. That being said, not all Liang family members are as motivated as you. I'm afraid they can't lead the troops and can't take on the heavy responsibility. Especially your father and second uncle, they are so exhausted from smoking opium, Liang Weiming said with regret. Among the many Liang family members, Liang Zhao is one of the few Liang family members who can make him feel relieved. Grandfather is too soft-hearted. If it were me, I would cut off their money and send them to Australia to mine. Let's see if they still smoke opium, Liang Zhao said. These two rubbish can't be relied on. Xiaoyu went to California to join you. I am half a body and will soon be buried. I can't lead the army. Liang Weiming stood up and paced back and forth in the lobby, as if he was struggling. After struggling for a while, Liang Weiming made up his mind. Among the many Liang family children, only your fifth uncle and your fourth brother are worth using. Your fourth brother is too young. If you want to lead the militia, only your fifth uncle is the most suitable. Liang Weiming had 6 sons and 2 daughters, 2 of whom died when they were young. The living ones are Liang Xiaojun, Liang Yao's father, Liang Xiaokong, Liang Yao's second uncle, Liang Xiaoyu, Liang Yao's third uncle, Liang Xiaoqiong, Liang Yao's fifth uncle, and Liang Zhen, Liang Yao's aunt. Liang Yao's fifth uncle Liang Xiaoqiong has the title of Zhuren, and he is only 34 years old this year. He is in his prime, so Liang Xiaoqiong is the most suitable person to lead the militia. Liang Weiming originally hoped that Liang Shaoqiang would follow his old path and win the title of Jinshi. He was willing to let Liang Shaoqiang lead the militia, which shows that Liang Weiming was determined. It would be the best thing if the fifth uncle led the militia in Guangdong province on behalf of our Liang family. Liang Yao smiled. While the grandfather and grandson were talking, they heard the servant report, "Master, Pan, the governor, is visiting." Pan, the governor, is Pan Shichen, and the governor is the official title given to Pan Shichen by Emperor Dao Guang. However, Pan Shichen's Guangdong governor is a nominal title, and Liang Yao prefers to call Pan Shichen the real job of general merchant. Mr. Liang is really a man of foresight. I learned from Governor Yu that the emperor allowed the gentry in Guangxi, Guangdong, Hunan and Zhuangzi provinces to train local militias to guard against the Taiping rebellion. They will be called up by the imperial court when necessary, Pan Shichen said excitedly. Mr. Liang knows about military affairs. Please give me more advice on the training of Guangdong braves, Mr. Pan, why don't you consider it? Liang Yao teased. This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. There is nothing to consider. After returning to Guangzhou after the banquet that day, Pan Shichen had been thinking about it for a long time. He had made up his mind and decided to give it a try. I will naturally help you with the training of Guangdong braves. Guangdong is also my hometown. As a Guangdong native, I don't want my hometown to suffer from war, Liang Yao said with his hands behind his back. With Mr. Liang's help, my business will be done. After receiving Liang Yao's affirmative answer, Pan Shichen was overjoyed. Have Governor Yi and Governor Su agreed? If you want to do things in Guangdong, you can't do anything without the approval of these two governors, Liang Yao reminded. The two governors and governors have already arranged it. It is a thankless task to train the local militia. The gentry in Guangzhou are avoiding it. Except for me, they have no interest in running the local militia, Pan Shichen said. I am willing to be the first to do it. The two governors and governors are very happy. Yi Mingchen and Su Guangjin were of course very happy that they could share the pressure of public security in Guangdong without using local finances. General Merchant Pan came at the right time. My fifth uncle is living in the countryside and has nothing to do. Since the matter of training the Guangdong brave has been completed, I want my fifth uncle to find a job in the Guangdong brave, Liang Yao said. Liang Yao's intention, Pan Shichen, a veteran, knew it. It was nothing more than wanting to get involved in the Guangdong brave. In the matter of training the Guangdong brave, Pan Shichen needed Liang Yao's assistance, and he couldn't refuse Liang Yao. Furthermore, the Liang family is a prominent family in Xiangshan, representing the gentry of Xiangshan. It is also beneficial for Pan Shichen to have the support of the Xiangshan gentry to organize the Yuiong. With the help of the Liang family, Pan's training of the Yuiong will be like adding wings to a tiger, Pan Shichen said with a smile. Chapter 296, The Leading Role. Grandpa is old, my father and second uncle are almost useless, and the backbone of our Liang family will be up to Uncle Wu from now on. In the wing room, Liang Yao poured a glass of sake for Liang Shaoqiang. This sake was given to me by the Japanese general when I conquered Japan. I don't know if it suits Uncle Wu's taste. Liang Shaoqiang is not tall, but he is fat and strong, with a pair of thick mustaches. Although he is a scholar, his face is not full of bookish air. I am ashamed, it is not me who is responsible for the backbone of the Liang family, but you, my nephew. Liang Shaoqiang, with a guilty look on his face, picked up the wine cup and said to Liang Yao solemnly. Uncle Wu has done many things wrong in the past. This glass of wine is Uncle Wu's apology to you. In the past, the relationship between the brothers and uncles and nephews in the Liang family was not harmonious. When Liang Yao was young, Liang Shaoqiang did not look at Liang Yao well. After all, the Liang family is prosperous, and everyone hopes to get more attention from Mr. Liang. The so-called brotherly friendship is just a false appearance. If possible, Liang Yao naturally hopes that his father Liang Shaoqiang can come forward on behalf of the Liang family to assist Pan Shichen in organizing militia training. But his father does not have this ability now, and he can't count on him at all. Among the Shao generation of the Liang family, only Liang Shaoqiang can count on one or two. Ha. Fifth uncle is straightforward. Let the past unhappiness go with this glass of wine. Out of courtesy, Liang Yao returned a glass of wine to Liang Shaoqiang. This time you can recommend me in front of Governor Pan. This favor, fifth uncle really doesn't know how to repay you, Liang Zhao put down the wine cup and looked at Liang Zhao, whose speech and behavior were impeccable and his demeanor was calm and self-assured, with his eyes full of disbelief. Is this still the little boy who cried and was put on the foreign ship? The Liang Zhao in front of him is completely different from the Liang Zhao in Liang Zhao's impression. In just over 3 years, Liang Zhao has changed a lot. We are all family, so what is there to repay? Liang Zhao said with a smile. Good things should be kept within the family. How could I forget my family for such a good job? Your fifth uncle is already old, 34 years old and still has nothing to show for it. If it weren't for your recommendation, if he didn't pass the next imperial examination, I would have spent the rest of my life as a legal advisor, Liang Zhao said self-deprecatingly. Liang Zhao was being modest. Having the title of Juren was like getting a stepping stone to becoming an official. However, the starting point of a Juren's career was much lower than that of a Jinchi, and the upward space was not as large as that of a Jinchi. In addition, it was easy for him to be discriminated against by his colleagues. This was similar to the discrimination against academic qualifications in later generations, except that there was an insurmountable gap between Juren and Jinchi, which was much greater than the discrimination against academic qualifications in later generations. Of course, there are also some great people who were born as Juren. Zhuo Zongtang was born as a Juren, but this is only a minority of cases. After all, in addition to his outstanding personal abilities, Zhuo Zongtang also had ridiculous luck and connections. Generally speaking, if a Juren can become a county magistrate, it is equivalent to the smoke coming out of the ancestral grave. It is always good for Uncle Wu to have his own opinions, but don't blame my nephew for saying something unpleasant. Being a legal advisor is ultimately dependent on others. Although you can expand your network, you do dirty and tiring work and it is difficult to achieve great things. Liang Zhao stretched out his hand to the bamboo basket-shaped fire basket to warm it, and then changed the subject. I asked Jinchen to look for coal veins in Guangzhou. This morning he told me that a coal vein was found in the northern suburbs of Guangzhou. I want to buy these lands to open a mine, but these lands are owned by someone else. Grandpa is old and has difficulty walking in the cold weather. I will leave Xiangshan soon, so I will trouble Uncle Wu to buy land for mines. The coal Liang Zhao stored in the Xiangshan warehouse was basically bought from Hong Kong. Of course, the coal used by steamships in the Far East was mostly bought from the British. It has to be said that the quality of the British coal is indeed good. Liang Zhao has personally experienced this. When the expedition to Japan departed from California, the coal used on board was California coal produced in California. When departing from Xiangshan, the ship used British coal purchased from Hong Kong. Liang Zhao clearly felt that when using British coal, the ship traveled faster and the steam turbine encountered fewer mechanical failures. Whether it is coal produced in California or coal produced in the northeastern United States, the quality is not as good as British coal. This is a reality that Liang Zhao has to admit. After all, the quality of fuel is also a direct reflection of the strength of industrial strength. What's more tempting is that the British coal is not only of good quality, but also TMD cheaper. The strength of Britain in the Victorian era is beyond doubt. It is the only one in the world. In terms of coal production, it accounts for 2/3 of the world, which is 7 times that of America. This is why British coal is of good quality and cheap. British coal is good, but Liang Zhao can't rely on the British to sell him all the coal. His current relationship with the British is okay, but it doesn't mean that the relationship will be okay in the future. In Guangzhou, it would be better to have a coal-producing area of his own to provide protection for the supply station in Xiangshan in case of an accident. Fortunately, the reserves of Guangzhou coal mines are also considerable. The coal-producing area in Guangzhou that Liang Zhao asked Hu Jinshan to find is actually the coal mining area in Baiyun district of Guangzhou in later generations. It's just that the current urban area of Guangzhou is much smaller than in later generations. This mining area is located in the suburbs of the north of Guangzhou City. According to Hu Jinshan's investigation, most of this area is farmland, and the composition of the owners behind it is also relatively complicated. There are big bureaucrats, big landlords, small gentry and self-cultivating farmers. The process of buying these lands is cumbersome and takes some time. Liang Zhao obviously doesn't have so much time, and the Guangdong authorities also know that Liang Zhao is now an American, so it's troublesome for him to buy land on his own. It's more appropriate to let the Liang family come forward to buy the land. As long as you have enough money, with your current connections in Guangdong, it won't be too difficult to buy some real estate, Liang Zhao took the job, but he was still a little worried. But no one in our Liang family has ever opened a mine. No problem, I will transfer some people from California to open the mine, and Uncle Wu just needs to buy the land, Liang Zhao said. That's great, Liang Zhao nodded. While the uncle and nephew were talking happily, they heard the servant report. Pan Shichen asked Liang Zhao to help him select a group of militiamen. Xiangshan has a ready-made place to select militiamen. This is not because the people of Xiangshan County are tough and there are many people willing to serve as militiamen, nor because there are many refugees in Xiangshan County, but because Liang Zhao's temporary resettlement site for immigrants is in Xiangshan. 2 years ago, Xiangshan became the starting point for Chinese immigrants in California. Tens of thousands of Chinese immigrants were waiting here for ships to California, ready to embark on their journey and pursue their gold rush dreams. The temporary resettlement site for immigrants in Xiangshan is managed by the immigration guest house sent by Liang Zhao and the Guangzhou merchants who have a good relationship with Liang Zhao. The main job of the staff of the temporary resettlement site is to register the immigrants, most of whom are refugees from war-torn areas who have fled to Guangdong, provide basic food and accommodation to ensure that not too many people die every day, and appease the emotions of the refugees. These tasks seem simple, but in fact the workload is very large, because since last year, the resettlement site in Xiangshan has been overloaded, and the number of immigrants in the resettlement site has not been less than 20,000, and this number is still increasing. Now the data has approached 40,000. Chapter $297 Launcher. Thanks to Liang Zhao's money, the environment of the temporary resettlement site for immigrants in Xiangshan is not that bad. Chinese immigrants are Liang Zhao's capital for the west coast of the United States. In terms of immigration, Liang Zhao is still very willing to spend money. However, due to the large number of people and the weak constitution of the refugees, some people still fall down every day and never stand up again, and they can't wait until the day to board the ship. Especially in the cold winter, more people die. When Liang Zhao, Pan Shichen and Liang Zhao arrived at the resettlement site for immigrants, they ran into the management staff with scarves on their faces, who carried more than 20 cold and stiff bodies out of the resettlement site and cremated them on the spot. The disheveled refugees have long been accustomed to this. People die here every day, but the difference is how many people die every day. This is only the first hurdle for these refugees to immigrate to California. Even if they get on the ship, some people will die on the ship. Even if they arrive in California, not everyone can withstand the hurdle of acclimatization. Liang Zhao had experienced all these things personally. In 1849, when he took the Cape Town of the British Steamship Company to travel halfway around the world to California, a small number of people died on the way. He saw with his own eyes that the British crew threw the dying Chinese gold diggers from the ship into the sea, like throwing away garbage. To put it bluntly, the immigrants in the Xiangshan immigration resettlement site were refugees with nowhere to go. Immigrants with a little money would not choose to wait here, but would choose to buy a ticket to California at their own expense. No matter where, in which era, the rich always have more choices than the poor who have nothing. The person in charge of the Xiangshan immigration resettlement site is Hu Jinshan's cousin Hu Jinhao. Hu Jinhao, like Hu Jinshan, was a clerk at the Jardine Mason in his early years, and later came to Liang Zhao to find a job. Liang Zhao's eyes swept across several fires where corpses were cremated, and finally stopped at Hu Jinshan, who came out to greet him. The report you submitted to me said that no more than 50 people died here every day, but I saw at least 70 or 80 bodies with my own eyes. How do you explain it? The boss hasn't had time to see the latest report yet. This is 2 or 3 months ago? Facing Liang Zhao's questioning, Hu Jinhao answered calmly. 2 or 3 months ago, the grain we bought from Hunan, Zhangzi, Jiangnan and other places could be transported to Guangzhou. Now the Taiping rebels are making more and more trouble in Hunan, and the grain from these places can't be shipped out. It's also getting harder and harder to buy local grain in Guangdong, and more immigrants from all over the country are coming to Xiangshan after hearing the news. All we can do is to try our best to maintain the situation and try to keep more people alive. Guangdong and Guangxi have had poor harvests for years, and the price of rice has soared this year. It's not easy to feed 30,000 or 40,000 mouths. Pan Shichen looked at the resettlement site and said while twisting the rosary that he had twisted to patina. It's hard to find rice in the Guangzhou rice market now. Besides, not all of these refugees died of starvation, some died of freezing. Global Shipping Company has sent people to Southeast Asia to buy grain, but it will take some time to transport the grain to Xiangshan, Hu Jinshan also said on the side. How much grain is left in the granary? Liang Zhao asked. 8,120 dan, Hu Jinhao blurted out. 38,000 people, only 8,000 dan of grain. These grains can only last for 2 months at most. Liang Zhao frowned and said, ask the Guangzhou government for some grain. Tell them that if they don't give them food, the more than 38,000 refugees in Xiangshan will cause trouble, and we can't guarantee it. There was no civil uprising among these tens of thousands of refugees, and the officials in Guangdong had to kowtow to Liang Zhao. If they were stingy and refused to give any food, don't blame him for being rude. This, Hu Jinhao was a little hesitant. What are you afraid of? You are a citizen of the United States. Citizens of the United States enjoy extraterritoriality in the Qing dynasty. The laws of the Qing dynasty cannot punish your crimes, and the officials of the Qing dynasty dare not touch you. Liang Zhao raised his voice. After that, Liang Zhao turned around and told Hu Jinshan to send a ship to Japan to collect some food. In the future, there will be more and more refugees in the resettlement area. It is always good to prepare more food reserves. I will also ask Governor Yi for some food for Mr. Liang in the name of training local militia, Pan Shichen said. Thank you very much. Liang Zhao bowed to Pan Shichen to express his gratitude. Please help me purchase some cold-resistant items. It's just a trivial matter. I will leave it to Pan Shichen urged. Mr. Liang, let's go and select local militia. The resettlement area has a simple statistics of the refugees in the resettlement area. With the help of Hu Jinhao, Liang Zhao and Pan Shichen quickly completed the selection of local militia. From more than 38,000 refugees, 150 people were selected as the basis of the Guangdong militia. These 150 people are at least literate and have a certain cultural foundation. Although the illiteracy rate in the Qing dynasty was high, it was still possible to select 150 literate people from more than 38,000 people. Isn't 150 too few? Pan Shichen felt that Liang Zhao had selected too few people and wanted to select more. Not enough. Too much will not be enough. The most urgent task is to build up the framework of the Guangdong Yuan first. Liang Zhao thought that 150 people were just right. These people are trained as grassroots non-commissioned officers. As long as these people are trained, even if the number is rapidly expanded tenfold in the future, the Guangdong Yuan can guarantee a certain combat effectiveness. Moreover, suddenly recruiting thousands of township soldiers may bring disaster. Although Pan Shichen obtained permission to train township soldiers, the Qing high-level officials still had many concerns about the large-scale opening of township soldiers. Recruiting a large number of township soldiers at the beginning is likely to arouse the vigilance of the Qing high-level officials, which is not a good thing for Pan Shichen and Liang Zhao. It is better to be cautious at the beginning. Pan Shichen was a smart man and quickly realized Liang Zhao's intentions. Mr. Liang is thoughtful, but I am a little impatient and a little too proud. Wang Shu? Liang Zhao called Wang Shu, the captain of the California company. Your team of instructors will stay in Guangzhou to assist General Pan in training the Guangdong Yuan. Don't compromise on the training. Train these recruits according to the standards of the California Infantry Regiment. Yes, Colonel, Wang Shu replied in a sonorous voice. Liang Zhao selected 15 squad leaders from each company of the California Infantry Regiment to form an instructor team to help Pan Shichen and Liang Zhao train the first batch of rural braves. The California Infantry Regiment is basically composed of early Chinese immigrants, while the Arizona Infantry Regiment is composed of veterans recruited by Liang Zhao in the eastern and southern United States. Obviously, compared with the Arizona Infantry Regiment, the non-commissioned officers of the California Infantry Regiment are more suitable for the work of training Guangdong Yuan. After all, they are all Chinese and there is no language communication barrier. Pan Shichen looked at these strong and neat instructor teams with great envy. He was very satisfied with the team of instructors carefully selected by Liang Zhao. Pan Shichen knew that the California Infantry Regiment was the unit Liang Zhao relied on the most. Selecting non-commissioned officers from this unit showed Liang Zhao's sincerity. A good horse should be equipped with a good saddle, and a good soldier should be equipped with a good gun. Since we use Western methods to train soldiers, we should also use Western quick-firing guns. I wonder if Mr. Liang can sell me some Western quick-firing guns to arm the Guangdong brave. Pan Shichen talked to Liang Zhao about the purchase of weapons. The gun is not a problem. I can first allocate 500 Walter M1852 rifles to General Pan, but these guns and bullets are not cheap, Liang Zhao said. The Walter M1852 rifle is a rear-loading single-shot rifle developed and produced by California. In this era when even rifles have not been fully popularized in the major powers, the performance of the Walter M1852 can be said to be very advanced. Among the rifles currently in service in the major powers, the performance of the Walter M1852 is only slightly inferior to the Dries needle-fired rifle equipped by the Prussian army. The musketeers of the Qing dynasty are still equipped with matchlock guns from the pre-Ming dynasty. If the Yuyuang is equipped with this gun, it can be said that it will be a dimensionality reduction strike against the various armed forces within the territory of the Qing dynasty. Even if the great powers come, the Yuyuang will not be in vain if it is just infantry against infantry. There are two versions of the Walter M1852 rifle. One version uses metal-rimmed needle bullets, and the other version uses paper shell bullets and linen bullets like the Dries needle gun. The official name of the version using paper shell bullets and linen bullets is M1852E, which is the foreign trade version produced by Liang Zhao specifically for export. The cost of the foreign trade version is about 25% lower than the ordinary version, and the cost of each is $15. Liang Zhao directly sold the full-blooded version of the Walter M1852 rifle to Pan Shichen, which can be said to be very righteous. Of course, the full-blooded version of the Walter M1852 rifle also has disadvantages, that is, it is expensive. The expensiveness is not only reflected in the gun itself, but also in the bullets. Metal bullets are very advanced, but advancement often means high costs. Each metal-rimmed pin bullet costs 2.5 cents, which is 4 times the cost of paper shell bullets and linen bullets. Therefore, the crew of the Global Shipping Company, which has been equipped with Walter M1852 rifles, gave this gun a very appropriate nickname, the Dollar Launcher. Money is not a problem. As long as the Guangdong warriors can be trained, the money is worth spending, Pan Shichen said very happily. Compared with the donations to the court and the indemnity of the foreigners, the money for buying weapons is not worth mentioning. After the arrangements for the Guangdong warriors were completed, Liang Zhao sent Pan Shichen away. Fifth uncle, I have done everything I can for you. If the Guangdong warriors can be trained, they will be the most powerful army in the Qing dynasty. After Pan Shichen left, Liang Zhao put his hands behind his back and said to Liang Xiaoqiang earnestly, "How far the Liang family can go in the future depends on the ability and luck of the fifth uncle." Liang Zhao had no idea what kind of impact the flapping wings of the butterfly of the Guangdong army would have on the future. But he hoped that the situation on this land would develop in a direction that was favorable to him in the future. Uncle Wu has been doing nothing all his life, and training the Yuyuang is the biggest thing he has done in his life. Liang Xiaoqiang clenched his fists and said with a surge of emotion, "For the sake of our Liang family, to save face, your Uncle Wu will train the Yuyuang even if he is exhausted to death. I am very relieved that Uncle Wu has this intention." Liang Zhao showed a relieved smile on his face. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 298, California's Dilemma. 1852 was Christmas in the West. Although Liang Zhao was very strict in military discipline, he was not an unkind person. On Christmas Day, Liang Zhao gave all officers and soldiers of the Arizona Infantry Regiment and the Artillery Company of the California Infantry Regiment a day off, allowing them not to train today and let them celebrate Christmas to their heart's content. In addition to the holiday, Liang Zhao also gave all officers and soldiers who participated in the war, including the crew of the Global Shipping Company, a bonus of $5 as a reward. $5 in the mid-19th century was not a small amount of money, even in California, where the per capita income was much higher than other regions. $5 was a considerable amount of money. Ordinary workers in factories in the eastern United States worked 30 days a month and earned only $10 a month. Liang Zhao originally wanted to give a bonus of $10 directly, but thinking that the Spring Festival of 1853 would be more than a month later, he planned to give the Chinese soldiers a day off on the Spring Festival and give all soldiers a bonus of $5. At present, The various ethnic groups in California have not been well integrated. After all, ethnic integration is a long-term thing, and it is not possible to integrate immediately if you can. The composition of Liang Zhao's soldiers is relatively complex, including Chinese and white people. In order to make soldiers of different races fight for him in the same trench, in addition to giving them enough money, it is also important to treat them equally and not let soldiers of different ethnic groups have a gap. The Austro-Hungarian Empire more than 60 years later is a lesson for the future. The officers and crew who received the bonus were very happy, and they praised Liang Zhao's generosity and shouted, "Long live the colonel." For these big-headed soldiers with low overall cultural level, giving them heavy dollars is far more real than hypocritical Christmas blessings. Liang Zhao noticed that a few officers and soldiers could not hide their homesickness after receiving the bonus. Needless to say, these officers and soldiers must have started a family in California and wanted to go home. Liang Zhao counted on his fingers and found that he had been on the expedition for more than half a year, and it was time to return to America. Liang Zhao went to the Liang family compound to say goodbye to Liang Weiming, and Liang Weiming hoped that Liang Zhao would spend the new year in Xiangshan before leaving, but was rejected by Liang Zhao. These days, he has received letters from Robinson, Strauss, Deng Wenyu and others. Liang Zhao learned from the letters that California's current fiscal situation has already appeared in deficit, and the situation is becoming less and less optimistic. The state legislature has been arguing for more than 2 months on how to solve the financial problems of the California government without any result. They hope that Liang Zhao can return to California as soon as possible, and let Liang Zhao make the final decision to help California overcome the crisis. Of course, this also means that Liang Zhao will take the blame. Liang Zhao has formulated many policies for California, and a large part of California's fiscal revenue has been spent on these policies. For example, financial subsidies for compulsory education, subsidies for skilled immigrants, wages for the California militia, etc. Liang Zhao still understands those politicians in California. Rather than saying that they can't argue to a conclusion in the state legislature and can't think of a way to solve the fiscal deficit problem, it is better to say that none of the members of the state legislature are willing to bear the consequences of making decisions. In addition to California's fiscal problems, whether to start the construction of the Pacific Central Railway also requires Liang Zhao to go back before making a decision. The construction of the Pacific Railway is a national super project. Although Liang Zhao is one of the few wealthy men in the United States with strong financial resources, the Pacific Railway is still beyond Liang Zhao's ability and cannot be completed by him alone. Liang Zhao needs to cooperate with other railway tycoons, capitalists, and investors, and he needs the strong support of the American state machine. Seeing that Liang Zhao has made up his mind to leave, Liang Weiming can't force Liang Zhao to stay. "Since you have made up your mind to leave, I can't keep you. It's just that when you are 20 years old, you are overseas and have not yet performed the ceremony of coming of age and taken a name. It's not too late to perform the ceremony of coming of age and take a name before leaving," Liang Weiming said reluctantly. "I forgot about this." "Then listen to Grandpa. It's not too late to perform the ceremony of coming of age and take a name before leaving," Liang Zhao agreed. "Third brother, take me with you when you go to America this time. I also want to go to California with you to make a living." Liang Zhao had just finished talking about the ceremony of coming of age with Liang Weiming when Liang Yi came up and asked Liang Zhao to take him to California. Liang Yi is the son of Liang Zhao's second uncle Liang Xiaoquang, and the sixth among the grandchildren of a Liang family. Although Liang Yi is the sixth, the age difference of the grandchildren of a Liang family is not big, and they are basically born in those years. Liang Yi is only 4 years younger than Liang Zhao. Among the grandchildren of a Liang family, Liang Yi is outstanding. There are only 2 people with official titles among the grandchildren of a Liang family, one is Liang Zhao, and the other is Liang Yi. California is not as comfortable as Xiangshan, and your third brother doesn't support idle people, Liang Zhao reminded Liang Yi. "I'm not an idle person. I heard that many of my third brother's businesses have to deal with foreigners. I specially learned English from the master of Tongfuxing, hoping to be a helper by my third brother's side," Liang Yi said hurriedly, fearing that Liang Zhao would not take him. "Whether you go to California or stay in Xiangshan, it's not up to me. It depends on Grandpa's opinion." Liang Zhao gave the decision to Liang Weiming. After his fifth uncle Liang Weiming participated in the militia work, Liang Yi was the only one left in the Liang family who was good at the imperial examination. "Grandpa, please let me go," Liang Yi begged Liang Weiming. Although Liang Weiming was reluctant, facing Liang Yi's begging, Liang Weiming hesitated for a moment and said helplessly, "Even if I let you stay, you have no intention of studying for the imperial examination, and the most taboo in studying is distraction." Liang Weiming, the feudal patriarch, rarely thought it through. Instead of forcing Liang Yi, who had no intention of taking the imperial examination, to continue reading the 4 books and 5 classics and finally achieve nothing, it would be better to let Liang Yi and Liang Zhao go out and try their luck. After all, Liang Zhao has proved to him with practical actions that there is not only one way to go in the world, the imperial examination. "Why don't you thank Grandpa quickly?" Liang Zhao winked at Liang Yi. "Thank you, Grandpa," Liang Yi thanked Liang Weiming happily. "You young people want to go out and try your luck. Grandpa can't stop you. Just don't forget Grandpa's old bones in your spare time and come back to see Grandpa." Liang Weiming squeezed out a bitter smile. 3 days later, Liang Weiming held a ceremony for Liang Zhao to be crowned. Liang Zhao, who was about to turn 23, finally had his courtesy name, Xiaoming. After the ceremony, Liang Zhao sailed across the Pacific Ocean and returned to California. Liang Zhao's original plan was to follow the same route as Perry, take the Indian Ocean route, pass the Cape of Good Hope, and finally drop anchor in Baltimore, Maryland, and go to Washington to report to President Fillmore on the expedition to Japan. However, plans cannot keep up with changes. The situation in California was urgent, so Liang Zhao decided to cross the Pacific Ocean directly and return to California as quickly as possible. After finishing his work in California, he would go to Washington. Chapter 299 We1. America before the Civil War had never really experienced the pain of war. The so-called anti-war ideology and war weariness had no soil for survival in America before the Civil War. America for Americans, destiny, expansion and conquest were the mainstream ideas of America during this period. Even Treasury Secretary Corwin, the representative of the Doves during this period, did not stand up and clearly oppose the American expedition to Japan. At most, he published some articles in the newspaper that the expedition to Japan was a waste of money and labor to show his presence and show that he still supported peace. Compared with the fierce anti-war attitude and sharp words during the Mexican period, Corwin's performance in sending troops to Japan surprised his former colleagues. After all, the war with Mexico has the risk of affecting the American mainland, while the war with Japan in the Far East does not have such a risk at all. Moreover, America also needs a war to divert the contradictions within the United States and enhance the prestige of the current government. And Corwin himself is also a member of the current government cabinet. The attitude of the Dove representatives at the top is like this, so there is no need to elaborate on the hawks and the blind American people at the bottom. Even Fillmore himself believed that America, which had little presence in the civilized world, sometimes needed to use war to show its presence, inject a shot of adrenaline into the people, and enhance the country's national pride. The news of Perry's return from the East India Fleet was immediately transmitted to Washington through the Baltimore telegraph line. Soon, a note was delivered to Fillmore's desk. There was only a very short sentence on the note, so short that the sentence consisted of only 2 words, "We won." "God bless America." Fillmore devoutly made a cross on his chest and jumped up from his seat excitedly. He knew what these 2 short words meant and how much information they contained. Although the people who knew Japan best in America before the war had described to him how backward Japanese society was and how fragile the Tokugawa shogunate was. But after the expeditionary force set out, Fillmore was still very uneasy. After all, he had not personally visited the country, and his understanding of Japan was limited to the descriptions of Liang Zhao and some politicians who claimed to understand Japan. However, the success or failure of the war against this strange country was related to whether Fillmore could be re-elected. He did not have a deep foundation in American politics, and his ability to become president was largely due to luck. Fillmore tried his best to promote the Compromise of 1850. Although the bill eased the contradictions between the North and the South, from another perspective, it can also be understood that Fillmore offended the factory owners and capitalists in the North and did not win the support of the slave owners in the South. In last year's presidential election, Franklin Pierce, a Democrat who unexpectedly emerged as a presidential nominee, became the strongest competitor for Fillmore's presidency. Pierce's political resume was unremarkable, and his short military career became a joke in the American military. New Hampshire, where Pierce was located, had never produced an American president before. Fillmore did not expect such a person to become Fillmore's strongest competitor. And even the Democratic Party did not expect it. "I will go to Baltimore to personally welcome the triumphant return of the American Army," and the two generals, Fillmore, who was overjoyed, danced excitedly in the office and explained to the secretary beside him. "Mr. President, Mr. Liang is still a colonel," the secretary beside him reminded Fillmore. "He will soon be a brigadier general," Fillmore said in a very affirmative tone. It is not an exaggeration to say that Perry and Liang Zhao are his saviors. Not to mention the brigadier general, even if Liang Zhao wants to be the Secretary of War, Fillmore is willing to fight for Liang Zhao. Of course, this move was not a whim of Fillmore, but also meant to humiliate his rival Pierce and Pierce's deep Democratic Party. In addition to being a nominal militia colonel, Pierce did not have any impressive military resume, but during the Mexican-American War, Pierce was promoted to a brigadier general in the regular army. What is shocking is that Pierce, who had been in the army for less than 10 months, not only became a brigadier general, but also commanded a troop to go to Mexico to participate in the war. Pierce had no combat experience, command ability, management ability and talent. Not only did he not make any achievements on the battlefield, but he pretended to be sick and unconscious on the battlefield. After the war, he became a laughingstock of shame in the American military. Fillmore was very happy to make a fuss about his opponent's disgraceful past. When Fillmore arrived in Baltimore by train, the streets of Baltimore were already empty. Farmers in Baltimore and even around the city spontaneously gathered at the port, waving the stars and stripes in their hands, shouting "Long live America, long live the United States." What's more, they held high the portraits of Perry and Liang Zhao. As soon as the Mississippi entered the port of Baltimore, Perry saw Fillmore surrounded by a group of politicians and reporters. The military band that had been waiting at the port played the Star-Spangled Banner to welcome the return of the expeditionary soldiers. "Mr. President, our wish has come true. From now on, America has a place in the Far East." Perry, wearing a Navy Admiral uniform and with tears in his eyes, walked off the Mississippi and excitedly handed the U.S.-Japan Treaty of Amity and Nagasaki Treaty in his hand to Fillmore. Expanding America's influence to Asia was Perry's lifelong goal, and this goal was finally realized in his hands. "This is an unparalleled great victory," Fillmore praised after receiving the two treaties. Then Perry turned around and held up the treaties in his hand to the crowds of people behind him, shouting, "This is a historic day. From now on, America's influence will not only be limited to the American mainland, but Asia will also have a place for us Americans. Long live America, long live the President." The overwhelming shouts were like waves, one after another, and did not stop for a long time. Looking at the boiling crowd, Perry's mouth showed a proud smile without disguising. Whereas Colonel Liang, seeing that he had not seen another hero Liang Zhao for a long time, Fillmore asked Perry. "Colonel Liang is dealing with the Nagasaki garrison. According to the treaty, we have obtained the right to garrison in Nagasaki," Perry replied. "Thank you for your hard work on this expedition. You are all American heroes," Fillmore said. "Before, I was worried that the discord between the Navy and the Army would affect your cooperation. Colonel Liang and I do have differences on some specific details, but overall our cooperation is quite pleasant. Colonel Liang is a very careful person. Without Colonel Liang's advanced preparation and arrangements, this expedition would not be so smooth," Perry said. "To be honest, Colonel Liang is the biggest hero of this expeditionary military operation, and I am just a supporting role." Perry's words were not false modesty, but his true thoughts. Perry even felt that even without the participation of the Navy, Liang Zhao could complete this expedition independently with his own abilities. "Come on, let's talk it over in detail on my train," Fillmore said to Perry. Chapter 300 Promotion. Fillmore's presidential train was specially built for Fillmore by the Atlantic Railway Company under the American Group. The locomotive used in this train is also a locomotive of the Pioneer series. The biggest difference between this train and ordinary trains is the extremely luxurious and spacious carriages. Liang Zhao is indeed a person who can often surprise people. Fillmore flipped through the U.S.-Japan Treaty of Amity and Nagasaki Treaty signed with Japan this time, as well as the post-war report submitted by Perry, and the smile on his face became brighter and brighter. Liang Zhao and Perry not only completed this expedition, but also achieved results far beyond Fillmore's expectations. Fillmore was also worried that the military expenditure spent on this expedition would cause dissatisfaction among the people, and the Democrats would make a fuss about it and accuse him of militarism during his tenure. Now it seems that Fillmore was completely overthinking. Compared with the huge military expenditure of $126 million spent on the Mexican-American War and the $10 million in compensation paid to Mexico after the war, the money spent on this expedition to Japan is not even a fraction of the Mexican-American War, and the casualties can be ignored. The 16.4 million taels of silver indemnity from the Tokugawa shogunate and the Hizen domain not only covered the military expenses of the expedition, but also had a large surplus. The only drawback was that the indemnity was not paid in one lump sum, but in installments over 10 years. With the indemnity, Japan was founded, the Tokugawa shogunate agreed to exchange ministers and consuls, and they even obtained a concession and the right to station troops in Nagasaki. Fillmore had nothing to be dissatisfied with, and such an achievement could fully give the American people a satisfactory explanation. It's hard to disagree with your point of view, Perry shrugged and said, Colonel Liang's excellent command and dispatch ability and accurate judgment of the situation are amazing. Perry recalled the experience of fighting side by side with Liang Zhao in Japan. The spectacular scene of 2,000 American soldiers against the 20,000 or 30,000 shogunate troops emerged in his mind. He couldn't help but add, an extraordinary courage and boldness. Before the Battle of Kanagawa, Perry was unsure whether the American army, which was at an absolute disadvantage in numbers and fighting away from home, could defeat the shogunate army of the Tokugawa shogunate. In the end, Liang Zhao made the final decision and decided to defeat the shogunate army, go straight to Edo, and force the Tokugawa shogunate to sign a treaty to open the country. You don't think so highly of your colleagues in the Navy. This time you think so highly of an army colonel. Aren't you afraid that your colleagues in the Navy will be unhappy? Fillmore said with a smile. I even think your performance this time is better than the British expedition to the Qing dynasty. Fillmore couldn't help but compare the American expedition to Japan with the British military expedition to the Qing dynasty 13 years ago. In terms of the war process, it took the British Empire nearly 3 years to force the Qing dynasty to negotiate and sign a peace agreement. The American expedition to Japan took less than a year from departure to the end of the war. In terms of the results achieved, the results achieved by the United States in this war were not worse than those achieved by Britain, and even the casualties were less than those of the British Army at that time. Mr. President, I am talking about the facts, Perry said seriously. If the officers of the Navy can perform like this, I will not be stingy to praise them, or even promote them. It's just that I feel that I can't see through Liang Zhao. I always feel that there is something wrong with him. Wrong. Fillmore closed the treaty. Yes, I have been to Liang Zhao's hometown this time and learned about his life experience. He was born in a gentleman's family without any military background and had no formal military education, but his military ability was not bad at all. In addition, many clauses of these two treaties were drafted by Liang Zhao. It seems that he also has a certain talent in diplomacy, Perry said after thinking seriously. God is always so unfair. A very small number of chosen sons are born with talents that ordinary people do not have. After the Battle of Toulon, Napoleon was promoted to brigadier general at the age of 24. This was unprecedented in Europe at that time. He had personally experienced some of Liang Zhao's abilities. When he was still vice president, Liang Zhao gave him a California Star as a gift. The California Star is still collected in his private residence. You want to promote Liang Zhao to brigadier general? Perry asked curiously, then counted with his fingers and said with a smile, Liang Zhao is only 23 years old this year. If he is promoted to brigadier general, he will be the youngest general in American history. Perry took back the word exceptional before he even said it. It was reasonable to promote him to brigadier general for his military merits in the conquest of Japan, and it was not an exceptional promotion. It is a common practice to reward people according to their merits after the war. If there are merits but no rewards, wouldn't it chill the hearts of American soldiers? Who will be willing to fight for America in the future? Perry smiled. Why, do you think it is inappropriate? I don't have such an idea. Perry shook his head and said, besides, it is not my turn as a naval officer to comment on the promotion and demotion of army officers. Liang Zhao is from the army, and Perry is from the navy. Liang Zhao's promotion has no conflict of interest with Perry. Perry also did not object to Liang Zhao being promoted to brigadier general of the army. I know what you want to say. As a general, Liang Zhao is indeed too young. Besides, Liang Zhao does not have a good relationship with the Democrats, Fillmore said, looking at the grass and wood houses that were constantly retreating outside the window. I hope that during my tenure, whether it is the Army or the Navy of the United States, the basis for the promotion of officers is ability, not money, qualifications and connections. I will not only promote Liang Zhao to the rank of Brigadier General of the Army, but also promote you to the rank of Secretary of the Navy. Of course, I am not promoting you out of selfishness. This is what you deserve. Liang Zhao is too young, and there will definitely be resistance to promoting Liang Zhao to the rank of Brigadier General of the Army, and this resistance is very large. Fillmore is also mentally prepared. As for the bad relationship between Liang Zhao and the Democrats, it is a well-known fact. Many of the early consortiums that came to California had Democratic backgrounds behind them, and Calhoun, who was angered to death by Liang Zhao, was the leader of the Democratic Party. Burnett, who was rumored to have died at the hands of native Indians more than a year ago, was also a Democrat. Democrats still don't want to believe that Burnett died at the hands of Native Americans. They firmly believe that this incident must be related to Liang Zhao, but they have no evidence and can do nothing about Burnett's death. But none of this matters. Fillmore is a Whig, and the Whigs were originally a political party formed by a group of politicians who gathered together to oppose the Democratic Party. The Whigs often oppose the Democratic Party in order to oppose the Democratic Party, and the Democratic Party is no exception. Especially now that it is still the election period, as long as Fillmore makes decisions and personnel appointments, regardless of whether they are reasonable or not, most Democrats will oppose it. Most of the time, most politicians are irrational, and rational politicians are always regarded as aliens and marginalized. Liang Zhao's promotion will be opposed, and the appointment of Perry as Secretary of the Navy will also be opposed. But compared with Liang Zhao, Perry is white and comes from a naval family. Perry has a long career in the Navy, a higher reputation, and is older. The resistance to appointing Perry as Secretary of the Navy will be smaller. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.